All right.
Hello.
Hey, Dooby.
Hello.
Have you met Dooby, Carrie Smith?
Haven't. My first time meeting all of you, truly.
Yeah. So Dooby is he's one of the people that runs the politics Discord, which has over 70,000 people on it. They have done AMAs with like Roger Stone and like. If you can think of a political person, they've somehow managed to get an AMA from them. And like, it's a wild fucking place. Be careful if you go into that Discord server because every political affiliation is allowed.
Politics?
Discord.gg /politics. That's it.
Okay, I've got to learn Discord.
Yeah. You got to link up with him at some point in time if you want to do an AMA or something though. Cause there's a lot of, there's a lot of cool people in there, but turn your fucking frog camera on, bitch.
Yeah, I'm putting on my makeup. Give me a second.
Due to what he runs and the wild shit that happens in that Discord, he does not show his face.
My Wednesday night co-host does not show his face because he has a big
Same
job.
Same thing.
Know,
yeah.
Yeah. You know. Hey, so here's a weird small world thing. I didn't know, or maybe I did know and I forgot we were going to also touch on the West Memphis 3 tonight. Did I tell you I transcribed Damien Eccles' first book from prison for him?
No.
What? No, you didn't tell me that.
I used to manage comedians in my old life, my woke life, and one of the comedians I managed was Margaret Cho, and she became one of his celebrity supporters. So it's so weird because I've recently started talking to this true crime podcaster, Roberta Glass, who believes that they're guilty. And Roberta Glass is fascinating. I'm going to be on her channel next week sometime. And so we were talking about this, and some of her videos have made me, I used to be a true believer in their innocence. And anyway, I pulled out all these letters. I wasn't sure if I still had some of them, but I have letters he sent me from prison. He sent like a gift at the end, and this book that I got trashed for because when I transcribed it, I'm not the best typer, and apparently I called his friend Brian Brain all the way throughout the book. I saw people were complaining about that.
Oh, that's fucking amazing.
But yeah, isn't that weird? That was like in my old life, so sometimes I forget about old life things, and then I was like, oh,
that's
yeah,
amazing.
Well, actually, yeah, I don't know what I think about that case anymore. I mean, I know I don't want to jump right into that one, but it was just funny hearing you talk about that one.
Oh no, this is totally freeform. But like the reason I thought this would be like a really cool kind of worlds collide situation is, you know, I read this book, which is a very, very leftist book, right? It's a lefty sociology book, but you know, whatever. This book by John Meacham, The Soul for America. And one of the things, basically his argument, and this was quite a few years ago, but his argument was, you know, about the political polarization occurring in America and how we all think this is like the worst time ever. And he basically makes this argument that like, no, dude, like every 30 or 40 years, America goes through this cultural fucking insanity where like.
Wait, what book is this?
The Soul of America by John. Hold on, I have it right here. I can see it.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
That's fine. He's got headphones on. He can hear you.
Yeah, so John Meacham, The Soul of America. It's like I said, the battle for our better angels. You know, it's a left-wing sociologist's take on it. So you get some cringe, you know, talk about fascism and, you know, random stuff like that. But, you know, I read The Enemy sometimes. But it makes a really good kind of poignant argument, which is that we're always stuck in this mentality of like the current culture war. And the lead up to Halloween and the fact that we're all kind of like politically knowledgeable people, but also kind of have like some level of interest in this, myself probably the least, but I really like the Satanic Panic because of D&D and metal. And so like, I thought this would be like an interesting thing because we're in another one of those, right? Like we're currently living in this cultural movement of like critical theory is taking over everything and they're teaching wild shit in schools.
Mass formation theory, right?
Yes, like we're in one of those times, and it's like, will it be like the Satanic Panic and we all look back on it and go, that was crazy? Will it destroy certain institutions? Well, we have weird laws that still stick around, like ESRB ratings on music and video games, and then you find out that it all came from like panicking fucking Al Gore's wife. You know what I mean? Like, who knows what it'll be, but the lead up to Halloween, it just seemed like a perfect kind of thing to grab some people and talk about. Like I said, Pura Amorata, if you haven't met her, you'll meet her. She's mostly a late night game streamer and plays a lot of horror games. She's good people. I don't know that Dooby's met her though. She's not really in politics, but kinda does some politics stuff. Fellow libertarian, good people.
Oh, it's a great topic. I agree with you. The reason I was asking about that book is there's a book that we read a while ago for book club called The Fourth Turning. Cameron Pasha, he's a screenwriter.
Yes.
He really suggested that. And I know a lot of people have been reading it. Oh, I have no idea. Cameron was talking about it for a long time, and so we finally read it. And it was written in 1996 by these two historians.
Well, they had a lot more than just historians. They had economists that they consulted. They had consulted a lot of people. Yeah.
You read it?
A while ago, like maybe like a decade ago. I mean, like from what I understand, the basic premise of it is that human beings have short memory cycles or short lives, and we don't really remember the kind of how the culture is. And so roughly like every 80 to 100 years, there's a cycle. And it's basically a book that really accurately predicts the future in scary ways. They predicted Social Security would be what would collapse the economy, and they predicted there would be like a terror stack about economic things. They predicted that there would be like race relations that would like be restarted in the 2000s. Like they predicted a lot, but it's basically good, strong men create good times create weak men, men create hard times create strong men.
It was just interesting because it, it's kind of saying we still think about time as cyclical, obviously, because we reset the calendar every year, and we have 60 minutes in an hour, and then we reset. Like we still acknowledge it's cyclical in some ways, but we don't tend to think of it anymore as cyclical in terms of how humans behave and culture, and we sort of have started thinking of it only as linear, and it was arguing no, like human behavior is also cyclical. I thought that was kind of interesting, but
yeah, weird aside, but why not go there? It reminds me of Mathieu Pajot and his kind of work that he has done along with his brother. He's a Orthodox iconographer, and one of the things that he says is that Christians' interpretation of the Bible is really, really flawed, as our atheist interpretation of the Bible, because we had the scientific revolution and we tend to think of time more linearly, and we tend to think of things as like more literally because we're scientific minded, and that
whereas a lot of the Bible is poetry,
right? Or that it's allegorical, or that it's not actually a metaphor or a poetry. What it's really arguing is that it is arguing truth, but it's arguing truth about the nature of reality, not necessarily truth about the historical fact or the timeline. And so, and so he makes that argument like, thinking about time and like the covenant with God and like the cyclical nature of like, Israel falls out of favor. Israel figures their things out. Israel rebuilds themselves. Israel kind of like loses favor. And like it's really more about like, God's promises in his covenant, not really like a linear fashion, but like a promise that will be yet to come and things like that. It's really interesting. He has a book. I can't remember it right now. It's not important, but it's definitely a good read.
You're making me think of my pastor was talking about this once. He's like, Bible, God, if you're a Christian, I recognize some people watching or not, and maybe some of you guys are not, but he was saying it's not meant to be a science textbook. That's not what God was trying to write for people. And but we look at it as like, well, there's this Bible verse that says if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, as if the mustard seed is the smallest seed, and it's not. The orchid seed is the smallest seed. Why wouldn't God knows that, even if those people didn't know what an orchid was. And I'm just like, God's going to be like, hey, listen, if you have faith as small as this seed of this, well, there's this flower you've never heard of. It's called an orchid. If you have
what I like to think of?
It's not a science book.
I'm going to pull this back to the Satanic Panic, but
okay.
I just want to say this. if you are trying to take a really literal interpretation of the Bible, then what I would like you to do if you live in the United States of America is I would like you to drive to a small town in any area that has a lot of tall mountains, and then just go speak to mountain people and see if you can understand the metaphors that come out of their fucking mouth. And if you can, maybe then I will trust your opinion at interpreting the 4 times translated metaphors from people living 2,000 years ago accurately, because I know that you can at least drive to Appalachia and talk to those people and get something from them. Because I'm going to tell you this, my family's from Appalachia, and I go out there, and when I'm out in Appalachia, I sometimes wonder, what the fuck did those people just say to me? I know that those were all English words, but the order that you put them in is confounding.
Family there. I know what you mean.
All right, Dooby, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah.
I did catch some of the presentation he did. I caught most of it. Then I had to help my girlfriend for a bit.
Yeah,
But,
so we kind of had to
very
blitz
in-depth,
through.
very good presentation.
So we had to skim through a lot of stuff. I didn't touch on D&D at all, which is, you can't talk about the Satanic Panic without talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, for sure.
But dude, honestly, when doing my research, I had never heard, and I kind of want to talk about this, the Martinsville Nightmare in Saskatchewan, Canada. Have any of you heard about this before?
Is that the daycare?
So there's most of them are daycares, so you're gonna have to be more specific than that. A lot of Satanic Panic shit is daycares.
It sounds very familiar. I'm thinking of a daycare where actually no, I think you spoke about this one already in the presentation, where they had this like social worker or psychologist come in and talk to the children and over time convince them all that they'd been molested. And
this one was actually the police. So this was actually the police. So in Martinsville, this was this nice little quiet town in Saskatchewan, and called Martinsville, and a nice little small town. And there is this child that comes forward, and the parents believe that they've been sexually abused. Right now, there is evidence of sexual abuse, and but however, the police department's like bogged down with issues. And they have a lot of backlog of cases and things like that, and they have to hire people. And one of the people that they pull out, I can't remember her exact name because I forgot to write it down because I'm an idiot. She comes out of retirement, and she was a former RCMP officer. She comes in to help and like kind of be sworn back in, right? So this is like kind of Canada's version of the FBI. And she comes in and investigates. And what she finds is the person that is accused of molesting this person is also has a little document attached to their file from a previous kind of accusation, and that accusation was never properly investigated. So she's like, oh, this is probably some child molestation. And so different police officers start getting involved and social workers start getting involved, and it starts to snowball because the town hears about it. Then all of a sudden it starts off with just, some sexual abuse, and slowly but surely it turns into everyone there was abusing. That this little town daycare everyone there was abusing. There was satanic cults, there was ritualistic satanic abuse, and it turns into this giant thing. And then the children start pointing the fingers at the police department, and the police are doing it. And now the whole town's scared about the police. And this is in the 90s, by the way. This is this is like a year before Geraldo Rivera like apologizes, right? Like this is like when the Satanic Panic has died down for the most part. So now the police, a few police are given polygraph tests to test whether or not they're one of the bad ones. And they're working from home, doing investigations with no oversight, with a police chief that like comes into town once a month. Okay. No oversight. They're trying to do this. And the original investigator, former RCMP, is like, dude, there's no evidence for this shit. I'm trying to find evidence, but she's interviewing dozens and dozens of children that are now claiming the most horrific shit. It starts to snowball, and they put out like a new police chief comes in. They put in a hotline to have people come in and call. And one of the people that calls is a pastor that says, I heard a rumor that the Brotherhood of the Ram is coming in, and they're bringing the forces of darkness to come in, and they're going to burn down churches and kill people. And so the police, because they're so swept up in this panic, believe it. They tell all of the cops to go home and get whatever guns they have and come into town to protect the town from whatever, from the horrors that would be the Brotherhood of the Ram. Of course, the Brotherhood of the Ram never shows up because there is no Brotherhood of the Ram. There is no satanic ritualistic abuse. There's just this one guy who is the son of these people that likely molested this young girl. And then eventually nobody goes into jail like a lot of other places, but it's so insane that this town got so wrapped up in it. And for years later, there was flyers that would constantly be put up in town that would say, "I believe the children." And there was like mistrust, and there was like factions, and like there was this little small town culture war based off of just spurious connections and rumors. And I don't know, like just the idea of like a bunch of cops holed up at night, like the Brotherhood of the Ram is coming in 92 is just amazing to me.
So it's the Crucible, like over and over. It's
Yeah.
the Salem witch trials over and over.
Yeah.
Well,
Where people just
the Crucible's based on McCarthyism, which kind of wasn't a witch trial.
Right. McCarthyism
At least
had
not
evidence.
actual McCarthyism.
Right.
House on American Activities was pretty fucked, though.
Yeah, House on American Activities was pretty fucked, but Joseph McCarthy was a hero. His name was slandered.
I'm just
You
looking
shocked right
some-
now? Oh, like
I'm
you
a little
like looked
upset.
in, you were like, I thought you were like just deer in headlights, like, did he just say Joseph McCarthy was a hero? Like,
Well, a
why
little
am
bit.
I on stream right now?
A little bit. You know, okay, let me tell you a little bit for any of your viewers that don't know me, my background, you should know. I was 20 years in the social justice cult. I do think of it as a cult. And I was one of the true believers. I really believed it was about ending racism and sexism, and I picked it up as a contagion, kind of a contagion, at Duke University in the 90s. And I took it into my career with me. As I mentioned, I worked with comedians previously. I took it into entertainment with me. I represented woke comedians. I produced woke television shows. And it took me 2 decades to get out of that cult. And one of the things that's been happening for me the past 3 years is I realized I have to question everything I think I know. And that takes a long time.
Yeah.
And it's only been a couple years.
So I have like a 2.5 hour video on my YouTube if you want to check it out. But incredibly long story short, Joseph McCarthy, along with a lot of other people, proved that there were hundreds of literal paid spies in the State Department that intentionally made sure that we were not able to fund or support the nationalists, and that we supported the communists in China, and had infiltrated every level of the State Department, to include the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury of the United States, was proven by several different sources, including a communist defector, the Venona documents, which were communications between Moscow that the FBI had, as well as several turncoats in State Department, et cetera, and investigations that showed that the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury was intentionally stopping money and working for the communists. That there was, let's see, we have. God, there's so much here, but real quick, I do James Forstall, Whitaker Chambers, and his fight where he was able to prove that Alger Hiss was a communist spy, and they were known as the Pumpkin Patch Papers because he hid the documents in pumpkins in a pumpkin field to protect his life from both the communists and the American State Department, because it was 100% taken over by the Russian Moscow communists. Elizabeth Bentley was the name of the spy. The Venona documents. Where is it?
Funny suffice to say,
Oh,
I will watch the
and
video.
Lattimore was another spy. So one of the
This
guys,
sounds like a great
Alger
movie.
Hiss,
Why isn't this a movie? This should be
because
a
it doesn't support the narrative. Alger Hiss was a spy for Moscow that was confirmed by proven through documents showing that he communicated, that he got orders from Moscow, and he was the number 2 and eventually the number 1 person in the entire United States State Department. And instead of getting in a bunch of trouble, he became the first embassy ever to the United Nations for the government. And the other individual, the other big one is oh my God, what's his name? Like Dex or something? What's his fucking name, Mark? Oh God.
What are we talking about?
his headphones off.
The guy that was the assistant secretary to the Treasury under Hoover, who just let him. Dexter White. There we go. Dexter White was the assistant secretary of the Treasury that intentionally held up hundreds of millions of dollars to Chinese nationalists and like weapons and money for them to fight against the communists. He was moved because of suspicions that he might be a spy to fund the World Bank and then fund the International Monetary Fund.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna watch your video.
Look it
why
up. I'm serious. I'm serious.
No, it's a topic I'm
It's
interested.
it's insane.
We've covered my Wednesday night show is about pop culture, and we talk about woke stuff. But we've actually been delving. My co-host Mystery Chris has this wealth of knowledge, so we've been delving into history, and so we've talked about some of the communist propaganda and entertainment, and about the Hollywood what was it, Hollywood 10? Was it the Hollywood 10? I don't know anything about.
Well, see, the thing
really
is
about
that
McCarthy and the politicians that you're talking about, like the spies in the State Department.
McCarthy is very separate from the House Un-Americans activity. And it's kind of obvious because it's in the name House. He was a senator. He wasn't in the House of Representatives. But the House Un-Americans Activities Committee, they HUAC, they did all kinds of fucked up shit going after people. And that was like the Red Scare. But McCarthy, they called it McCarthyism to slander his name and the proof. It's a wild rabbit. It's one of those Owen Benjamin moments. Like, be careful how many of these red pills you take before you end up in the mountains somewhere with like a goat, and you're just like, we never landed on the moon. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be careful. But it is an interesting
radiation belt.
But it is, the Red Scare is an example of us kind of like panicking as a culture and just going after everybody. And I think the Satanic Panic is another example of that. And I think we're kind of in another culture war now. And, I kind of look at the Satanic Panic almost as much as hundreds of people were put in jail for crimes they never committed, of the most horrible accusations and insanity of our culture. I mean, people were going on television playing AC/DC records, backwards, going, this proves that Satan is in the music and they're coming for you. And you hear that and you're like, oh, this must be some crazy late night preacher. And it's like, no, this is MSNBC. You know what I mean? Like the culture was gripped in fear and anxiety. And it kind of makes me, it's almost like a white pill that like, well, they got through it. The boomers fucking realized how crazy and stupid they were. Like, will we get through it?
I mean, I remember a lot of, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Bible Belt, South Carolina, and I remember there was all the talk about you can't watch Dungeons and Dragons. It was an animated series. You can't play the game and you can't watch it because it's satanic. Even the Smurfs, they came after the Smurfs.
They did come after the Smurfs, yes.
Remember that?
Well, I mean, I was born in 1990, so
it was Gargamel, right?
Oh, Gargamel.
I was born in 90. I don't fucking remember any of the Satanic Panic.
Plus that slut Smurfette.
Yeah. And they made a big deal about the fact that Papa Smurf wore red and all the other Smurfs wore white, and it was supposed to be this sort of satanic cult. And yeah, people were talking about that stuff when I was a kid.
D&D is kind of one of my favorite things to talk about in this. I'm a D&D nerd. I don't get to play that much anymore because, politics streamer. But the entire D&D thing really starts with James Egbert III, right? And James Egbert III went missing from Michigan State University. And he was, what happened in the end was he like was in college, was overwhelmed, and was like, I just want to get the fuck out of Dodge. I'm done with all of this. Went to be with some friends for like a month or two in Louisiana and just take a sabbatical and like cut himself off from his family. Back when you could just disappear and it was kind of a big deal, but not a big deal. You know, back when you could like, it was the very end of like being able to be like, I'm going to go get a pack of smokes, kids. And dad was never heard from again. Right. You know what I mean? Like the very end of that. And this guy, William Deere, who was a private investigator, who, funnily enough, wrote a book about the O.J. Simpson trial and why he didn't do it, and also was like a guest star on the show Alien Autopsy: Fact or Fiction. They hired this guy to look into it, and so this guy looks into it, and instead of like talking to his friends, chasing down leads or anything like that, he finds out that he's into Dungeons and Dragons, and he's convinced and convinces the media, holding up a picture of the AD&D model, right? Which is like the second Dungeons and Dragons book, not the one that came out in 74. And he holds this book up and claims that Dungeons and Dragons and the satanic influences made him go crazy, and he's wandering underneath the tunnels in Michigan State University and has likely died from insanity. And the whole media just bought it up, and they got death threats. Stores everywhere were burning books. They, there was Patricia Pulling. Oh God. Do you really remember the D&D craze, or do you know about that? It's probably too early for you even.
No, it wasn't too early for me. Maybe. I just remember like the kind of urban legend stuff, and I had parents who didn't want us buying it. You know,
horror!
It was that, hey, horror?
No.
How you doing?
What?
Hello.
Where? I'm good, thanks. You guys. Sorry I'm late.
No. Family comes first.
Oh,
Ohana
See
means
you
family.
again.
Speaking of horror, didn't they make that case where the college student into like a movie, like a really,
Yes.
really, really bad movie with Tom Hanks, like
Yeah.
Mazes and Monsters?
Monsters and Mazes, yeah. Oh God, that was a terrible movie.
Well, Monsters and Mazes is not actually specifically about that case. It's based off of a comic strip that was written by this like Christian fundamentalist. And
Is it
it's
Chick
funny.
Tracts?
Yes.
Was it Chick Tracts? Oh, Jesus Christ.
It was based partially off of Chick's Tracts as well as other things. And he demanded that the one demand that he make when they made the movie was that they remain true to the source material, which is part of the reason why it's so fucking ridiculous. And the original Chick's Tracts actually had at the bottom of the book burning portion that to make sure you get rid of your H.G. Wells and your Tolkien as well. And like all the Christians were like, yeah, no, you got to get rid of that part. No, we're keeping our Tolkien and our not H.G. Wells, Narnia, the fucking, why can't I?
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. Yeah. And so like that book is actually off of Chick's Tracts. I'm ashamed to say that Patricia Pulling is from Richmond, Virginia. So I apologize for my people and what we did to you, chat, and everyone involved. We don't claim her, but she is from here.
It could be worse.
Yeah. So Patricia Pulling is the woman whose son committed suicide, and she blamed Dungeons and Dragons for it.
Oh, she found it bad, right? Bothered about Dungeons
Yes.
and Dragons?
Yes, she founded
Yeah.
she founded that. And the hilarious thing is she had an associate's degree in sociology, and she started calling herself an expert on the satanic influences of Dungeons and Dragons and satanic cults based off of no knowledge whatsoever. And then she would go to police training seminars, and then the police training seminars would say, look how official we are. We have Patricia Pulling. And then she would say, look what an expert I am. I've gone all around the country doing these police seminars. And they were like feeding off of each other from their own fucking bullshit. Kind of like that comedian you were talking about, Mark.
Why does this all sound so familiar? It's like we're living something that's almost exactly like what happened once upon a time.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So I know you were busy, but like that's kind of what I was like wanted to have this like some people with some political knowledge in here for was as a white pill, but also as a black pill too, right? To realize that like our culture does this. This is just what humans do, is we have these moral panics, and we're in another moral panic right now. And it's hard to tell, you know what I mean? Like as the woke culture just takes over fucking everything with insanity. It's like, I see no difference between Tipper Gore going after heavy metal music than like, woke lefties and the 1619 Project, right? And it's like, we're just, but it's a little different because, they played the long game, and so because they played the long game, they're embedded in the institutions, so they have like a sense of legitimacy to their moral panic, and they're able to rephrase and reframe any conservative outrage reactions, or like, people that haven't gone with them, right? Because those are obviously two very different categories, as the moral panicking people, which I think honestly is probably genius on their part. And I hope that it doesn't mean that we eventually get to something worse than the Satanic Panic.
I think we're going to get to something worse.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to agree with Carrie on this one.
Can I have hope?
Eventually, we're going to get to an inquisition, and then things will get better. That's the way it works,
Yes.
Yes, it's a
It's
cycle.
the hope that kills you.
On the other side. Because these things, I think, if you are looking at it as history is cyclical, and humans go through these, in groups and large groups, go through these moral panics, it seems like it always has to get really bad before the majority either wakes up, refuses to comply, or it gets over their fear of speaking against it. And along the way, people who push the panic and who are the architects of it, they get done in by it too. You see that throughout history as well. I mean, you were talking about, what was the one you were talking about when we started? Martinsville, Satanic Sex Scandal. So they started accusing all these care workers and parents and people of being a part.
And police.
The police themselves were being accused. And that's why it made me think of the Salem witch trials, because they did the same thing. Some of the people who started off accusing others, they ended up being accused later. Giles Corey, I looked up his name so I got it right. He was one who, he believed it when they came after his wife. He believed the accusations. He was swept up in it. Then they accused him.
I think he just wanted a divorce.
Right? Like, I think I'm willing to bet like 50-50 shot here, right? That it's the same as the wife whose husband was injected with hydroxychloroquine fish cleaner. And then you find out that neither of them are conservatives, and that like both of them have high level degrees in STEM. And you're like, bitch, you did that shit on purpose. Like, I don't even want, like,
I completely believe she did that on purpose.
Oh yeah,
she was like, this is convenient. I was like, that's fucking an A+ 4D chess move there. Like, Trump made me do it.
But yeah, you can even go further back, even to the oh god, I just had the word for it in my head too. Inquisition. Yeah, and
French Revolution.
Robespierre,
he ended up dying the same way.
Yep.
Right. How's the pen is mightier than the sword? Well, it's not mightier than the guillotine, Robespierre. Like, sorry to inform you. Yeah, I'm trying to think about like other historical, like the Yellow Turban Rebellion even is a moral panic if you really like interpret it that way. Now you could look at it from like a class-based perspective and like government corruption, but I mean like it was also a religious movement against like the corruption of the religious people. And I mean that basically spurns the what is it, the three romances, right? Like that spurns like 100 years of war in ancient China, based off of a religious kind of, it's a big part of it is the rise in Buddhism in the population, and a moral panic against like the other, like kind of a religious war. I don't know that it quite fits a moral panic, but everyone kind of like in this social upheaval of what was a relatively stable society before.
If you think about what's really behind a moral panic, it's all about control and who controls morality and then controls society. So, I mean, you can't really equate the two because that's basically what they were fighting for, is the control.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough, but I'm just saying, like, there are elements of like massive social upheaval, because you could make the same argument against the French Revolution, right? You know, that there are these times where we kind of do that, and that was kind of why you talked about the fourth grade turning. And but I do think that the Satanic Panic is, you know, what interests me is how does new technology influence a moral panic? Because I think the new technology that's present in the Satanic Panic is the widespread usage of televisions in homes. The show Dark Shadows that rebrings the occult back in. You know, the televised war of the Vietnam War. The fact that, like, when one kind of panic happens at Michigan State University, everyone in the country, it's not just newspaper clippings now, but now it's like it's televised, and you see on TV this demonic figure with jewel eyes, over these group of adventurers, and think, oh, that must be Satan. And I wonder if, like, the internet indoctrination and, like, these social media websites and these forcing of these echo chambers is like a new technology that our society doesn't know how to adapt to, and is a weak link that, like, helps cause a new moral panic.
I think what's interesting is that the tendency for people to believe that something is like a widespread phenomenon because they happen to find a few videos of it on YouTube or on Twitter, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, see, you have a country
like
of 300 million. Yeah, you have like a country of like 300 million plus people in that country. At various points in time, they manage to get a video of someone being a racist or doing something bad, but because you've seen it like 4 or 5 times, now this is your reality. Everybody's secretly like this, and it's a huge problem that we need to do something about right now.
I think a lot of that. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
I think a lot of that people interpret that into being such a larger problem is they really don't understand how few people actually communicate on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, so they're seeing this, and you see it 100 times on Twitter, and all of a sudden you think, oh my God, if it's 100 times in this population, it's got to be so much more throughout the rest, without realizing what you're seeing on these platforms is such a condensed and often polarized section of society.
Yeah.
The problem is that.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, it may not be a large segment of the population, but they have a very big microphone online, and they steer. They come off of Twitter. They come off of Facebook. And they run for city council. I mean, they are the little town of Georgetown, Texas. It's just north of Austin. And, the slogan of Austin's been, like, keep Austin weird. The slogan of Georgetown is keep Georgetown normal. At least that's what we're trying to make it. Like, keep Georgetown normal. But the woke have infiltrated our little town. They're out on the town square every weekend. They're out there. They have the Black Lives Matter sign. It's mostly middle-aged white people, very wealthy middle-aged white people. They're under the BLM banner. They're trying to, they've already succeeded in getting all the pavers around the town square removed, because out of 200 and something bricks, like memorial bricks that people would buy and donate to the museum, they would get a brick and they could do it in memory of someone. There were 200 and something bricks, and 13 of them were in memory of Confederate soldiers. They got all 200 and something removed.
Oh my God.
They're now.
Well, I live in Richmond, Virginia, so I don't want to fucking talk about getting shit removed from the Confederacy.
Right, but I just mean
I'm saying, like, I'm still mad about that shit. All right.
I
Like,
live in
there's one
Manage to
fucking
get something
statue
removed.
you could have kept, all right? It was ours. It was the first one ever made on Monument Avenue in the capital of the Confederacy, and you took that shit down. Go fuck yourself, BLM. But please continue.
But the point is, they have real world power. I remember when I first started leaving woke, like waking up to it and noticing what was happening in the colleges and noticing the trend and the studies about how college students are afraid to say what they think. Like, crazy percentages of college students afraid to tell afraid of their peers, afraid of telling their peers what they think. And I had friends who consider themselves liberal but not woke, which is there's a big difference. Who were telling me, okay, I agree. I see this too. I see what's happening. You know, the stuff that was happening around the the Christakis professors at Yale, the Halloween costume. There was video footage of students surrounding this professor and having a shaming session because his wife had written an article basically saying students are adults and they can decide what's offensive and what's not. And we don't need the university to say that you can't wear certain costumes, right? They basically tried to run these professors out of town. So things like that were happening. And I remember friends of mine who are liberal saying, oh no, Carrie, don't worry. I see it too, but it's just in the colleges. These people have no influence. They're just online. They're just in the colleges. They have no influence.
They're just in the media. They're just in the bureaucracy. They're just in the HR departments. They're just in...
just being published.
Well, have power in the real world.
Do you know where you know how like the scary right-wing militia groups, right? There's two big ones, the Oath Keepers and the Three Percenters. Do you know where the Three Percenters get their name from?
Isn't it the amount of people it takes to overthrow the current government?
Close. But yes, and you can get a little closer, but yes. That is the percentage of all of the Americans that fought in the Revolutionary War. 97% of Americans didn't fight in the Revolutionary War. A good 40% were loyalists that supported the British. That's cheating, Mark. All right, that's cheating if you just That's cheating.
We had a request in chat. That's why I did it.
Oh, okay. That's fair. But yeah, so that's where they get their name from. So you're absolutely right. I do want to say that like this isn't something that's just the woke left. One of the things that I think is so interesting is I scroll through Twitter and because like I have to have a fucking Twitter now because I have to have a brand, but whatever. So I scroll through Twitter and I'll see like a video of like an altercation between like a white person and a black person, right? And for whatever reason, it doesn't matter who swings first. And then like 7 or 8 black people will like come together and like beat this person up, right? Like they just immediately gang up on this white person. And the comments will just be hundreds of people that are like, this is how black people are. Don't you see it? And every time I see that, I'm always like, have you personally ever seen that shit? Like in your whole fucking life, have you ever seen that shit? Or are you just seeing one fucking video and confirming this bias that you have, that this like racial bias that like black people gang up on white people and beat them and it's like a pandemic? It's like, does it happen? Yeah. Like, is it a phenomenon that like you pretty much never see a bunch of white people jump in to fight one black person? I mean, you do when they're the police, but other than that, you don't see it, right? But like, but it's just this, it's this off the rails like idea that this is everywhere in America. And it's like, no, dude, you saw a Twitter video and everyone that feels this way is already following this fucking account. And then they just spitballs and get shared amongst people that want to see this shit.
Yep.
I agree. It's not, I mean, taking cherry picking something and using it to say this is what the majority of people are like is not something that only the woke left does. I guess what I'm saying is the woke left is who currently has, I think, reins of power culturally in this country.
Absolutely. Well, I was talking about. Oh, sorry. I was talking about this, I think, last stream, and we were looking at. I don't remember what fucking. We were looking at we were looking at Cato Institute's research that presumably showed that illegal immigrants commit crime at a lower level, violent crime at lower levels. And this guy came on Fox News and said, that's all bullshit. We looked at the actual data. Here's where we're right. And then Cato responded and said, no, you're bullshit. So I was like, well, let's look at Cato's response, right? Let's be fair. Because, you know, I was a little bit suspect of the conservative because he wasn't it's a long story, but he wasn't talking about the actual statistical significance of like the error that they found. And I was like, if it's 1 or 2%, then Cato's still right. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're not doing a good enough job communicating this. So I look at Cato and I look at him for like in their article for like 10 seconds. They mention a name and I was like, okay, well, let's look at this person's citations on Google Scholar, chat. boom, they were like, we use an economic model to estimate the amount of people. And I'm like, already that's fucking sus. So I look at her and her most cited piece of research ever, his most cited piece of research ever is 24 citations. And I start looking at the titles, and one of them is does slavery cause hate crime at higher levels, and like the leftovers of slavery or some shit. And so I go into it, I find it, I unlock it, I look at the research, and lo and behold, it's a trash fucking correlational research that shows that was slavery here? Are hate crimes reported at a higher level here? Must be slavery. And it's like completely forgetting, like, you know, the diaspora, the economic conditions, civil war, Reconstruction, the difference in politics, the difference in ways cities are run, like, all just does a univariate analysis, says, yep, slavery causes hate crimes and it's still around today. And I was like, so you use this person's economic model. But what I noticed was the left, supported by the media, supported by academia, supported by government institutions most of the time. Sometimes, obviously, they're not. They get very little pushback, so they just get to promulgate pseudoscience constantly. And the right does this too, but when the right does it, they immediately get burned for doing it, right? And it's like, it kind of separates the wheat from the chaff. And you don't see this on the left. And so I do think that the echo chambers on the left during the kind of model like a moral panic more, in that because they have so many protections from so many different places, when they go off of the rails, there's nothing checking them. There's no one there to say, this is insane, look at how bad your methodology is. There's me with 40 live viewers, and there's like a brand new DGG orbiter that I can crush in a debate with like 200 live viewers, because social media fucking loves their lefties.
Making me think of, oh gosh, maybe I can find this while we're talking. The moral panic, it's not a right or left thing. I do believe right now it's the left who are the main people pushing this panic, and that they're the ones that have the cultural reins at the moment. But as you're talking about, you know, Dungeons and Dragons and the Smurfs and the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s, and you know, Tipper Gore and coming after CDs and heavy metal and stuff like that, that was from the right. And it's no. Whoever has the reins of power.
Tipper Gore was a leftist.
Tipper Gore is on the left. That's true.
And so is Al Gore. Like, that's the fucking bullshit media narrative that has been fed us, is that it was Christian conservatives and the fundamental Christians that were swept up in the Satanic Panic. But it was the fucking left too.
It was the left too. Don't you think, though, that the main people pushing at that time were from the right?
The main people pushing it from that time were Christians, except Christians, we used to have this thing called Blue Dog Democrats, and we used to have left-wing Christians and Union Christians. And
interestingly, CNN launched June 1st, 1980, starting the 24-hour news cycle as well.
Nice little tidbit. Right. So you're right that it wasn't the typical progressives or democratic socialists or your like hardcore lefties, but like they were a nothing in existence in the, I mean, like, think about it like this. In 1980, right, California was a staunchly Republican state that would never go Democrat. In 1984, Reagan proclaimed that California would never go Democrat. Right. So sure, you could say it's coming from the right, but like the Overton window of like what is the right has shifted to such a degree that like all of those Democrat lefties that were, you know, the Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton types would be considered Republicans now. So yeah, you could say it was coming from the right because it was coming from traditionalist people, but they were the left at the time.
Wait, so Scott, you like compared what's going on today to the Satanic Panic, and I think in a lot of ways I'd agree with you, right? But I'm wondering, like, because it doesn't look the same. Because like leading up to this, I watched a lot of like mini documentaries, a lot of like old interviews about the Satanic Panic, about Dungeons and Dragons, about all this stuff, and it doesn't feel the same. You know what like, do you know what I mean? It feels like,
Well,
do you think that's because the what they're pushing now is that there are victims in, you know, different like racial groups or whatever, and they're coming to rescue those people, and now so they're like angling themselves as like the saviors of this oppressed group. And if you push back against this at all, like you are like immediately just like cast down as like a bigot, a racist. They attach all the labels onto you, and they get rid of you. Like, I feel like I don't think, maybe that's it. I think that back then it probably wasn't as easy to just call somebody a Satanist, right? Or like
Right.
or to say that somebody's like a or like a witch or something, right? And like be taken seriously. I know people were saying that there are groups of witches, but if you were to call somebody outright, like say, hey, this person specifically is a witch, is a Satanist.
Yeah, it's not like just the accusation alone of a random person would be enough. It'd have to be like a snowball of like spurious connections that then people like kind of toss logic aside.
But now you can just call somebody a racist, and
the difference is a few things. I would say, number one, the Satanic Panic was reactionary, right? It wasn't an intentional movement, right? So the Satanic Panic was a reaction to the civil rights movement, a reaction to violence from leaded gasoline in our society and race riots that were occurring, a reaction to a changing culture. It was a Christian fundamentalist reaction, and another side that was rebelling. Gen Xers are rebelling against the boomers, right? Whereas today, what we have is a groundwork of philosophy that has moral prescriptions for the world. And I would say it's far more pernicious and far more likely to survive because of that. And it has institutional power in a way that the Satanic Panic did have institutional power, and that people in power were swept up in it. But it wasn't like it was an intentional philosophy that was promulgated, right? Like the current panic that we're in, the moral kind of upswelling that we're in, is one where, you know, I have on my Twitter, like, it's kind of my pinned tweet, right, where I have a pyramid, and I kind of separate the left into 4 categories, right? At the very top, you have the Marcusians, which are, you know, your World Economic Forum, you know, WPATH, UNESCO. You know, these people want to rule the world in like a socialist state where the wealthy have all of the power, and they tell you to shut up and eat the bugs and, you know, give up your money for climate change. And then you have the intelligentsia, the kind of like the known vowed Marxists that are in some of these organizations and kind of working under them, but ultimately they're the first people put up against the wall once the top really get the power. But these are the people that know the philosophy, know they're Marxists. They're not really part of a moral panic either. What they are is they're deeply ideologically embedded, but they believe it and they understand it. Then under them, you have the vanguard. These are the people that are in the moral panic. These are the college kids that really soak up all of this shit, but they don't really understand the philosophy. They just get the talking points, they get the passion, they get, like, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, they get certain concepts and certain ideas of oppressor narrative, and they go out and they act as an army. They act in activism, they act in all these other things. And then at the very bottom, you have the useful idiots. And these are the people that just want to be nice. They just want to get along. They think that Republicans are, you know, right-wing conspiracy theorists, reactionary, crazy people. And libertarians are even more insane, even though I don't know how, but we are. And these people are just like your typical Democrat voter that are like, oh no, drag queen story hour. I know it looks crazy, but it's actually good and it's open and we all want love, right? And they're in like a lesser level of the panic. Whereas with the moral panic, I think you had, with the Satanic Panic, you had the same thing, but you didn't have an intentional intelligentsia, and you didn't have a Marcusian elite. You didn't have a governmental structure at the very top that was promulgating ideas for the sake of their own power. You had the occasional politician or, you know, DA person or something that utilized this panic to gain short-term wins, but it's far less embedded. that's kind of what the difference I see between these two things.
Part of me
Yeah,
can't help
that
but
makes
wonder if they didn't see the results of the Satanic Panic and then, just feed it into the government to their benefit. But that's just being crazy looking.
I mean, I don't know. Yuri Bezmenov saw all that shit. They understood how to engage in psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Funny,
Yeah,
I saw.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I saw your chart, Scott, about the breaking down like who make all the different groups in the woke, and for the sake of ease, I've usually only thought of them as two groups. Maybe that's because that matters to me in terms of who I'm talking to, like if I'm trying to talk to a woke person. But I think I told you this. There's a great video that Brett Weinstein did called "How the Magic Trick Is Done," and he did this this talk. I think it was at the start of like when he was first being mobbed at Evergreen, and based on his experiences there, he was sort of saying there's two different groups. He called them the bad actors and the useful tools. And the bad actors are the ones who I actually think of them along the same lines of Jordan Peterson had a grad student named Brophy, I think is her last name. And she did a video, you can still find it on YouTube. It was an interview with Rebel Media where it was called "Where Do SJWs Come From?" And she said in her research, they had decided there were two types of woke, essentially two types of SJW. One they called the PC authoritarians, the politically correct authoritarians, and one they called the PC liberals. And so I started thinking of these two groups as like, oh, that's similar to what Brett Weinstein's talking about. And so one of those groups, just for the sake of ease, I think of them like the bad actors, the PC authoritarians, whatever you want to call them. They're the people who, they don't actually have a problem with oppression. They just want to be the ones oppressing. And I think the intelligentsia that you're talking about would be in that group, maybe with some of your other categories. They want to be the one, they're the ones with bad intent. They're not in it because they think.
I think they operate much like Nietzsche criticized Christians. They operate from slave morality, right? If you read Nietzsche's Will to Power, slave morality and master morality, they have an extreme form of slave morality, and they have what Nietzsche described as ressentiment, right? Which is this. It's not so much that they hate authority or as a concept. What it is they have resentment and hatred for the system in which they live. And it often is jealousy of those that have done better or have had better lives or have succeeded, and a personal hatred of themselves. But it's the slave morality aspect of ressentiment where, we convince ourselves that we're morally better than these people because we need that coping mechanism to explain the fact that we haven't achieved what we felt like we should have achieved. Is that And Christians do the same thing to a certain degree, which is, at least from a Nietzschean perspective, I don't know that I necessarily agree, but he would say that Christians have a slave morality in the sense that like, oh, all those wealthy, powerful, evil people, they'll get their day in heaven and we're the morally better people, etc. Other forms of altruism, I don't think Christianity really is founded quite the way that Nietzsche put it in that regard. And his original kind of interpretation was against Christians, but I think it more adequately describes the woke left.
I definitely think the woke left is fueled on resentment. And I definitely think the ones that I think of as the bad actors, like they want to be the ones oppressing. They want to be the ones with control and power. And I think a lot of them, right, it's all built on looking at the person next to you and seeing what they have that you covet, that you want. Then there's the other group, and again, for the sake of ease, I just think of it as these two groups. There are people in it. I know people in it still. Some people I worked with in my old life in the comedy world. I know people who are still in it who I believe have good intent, and those are the people that I think can wake up. They can leave it. They're in it because they believe the lies. They're caught up in this moral panic that we're talking about. Like they're caught up in this sort of not really
Paving the
looking
road
at,
to hell.
Yeah, the road to hell paved with good intentions. They believe in the just cause, and they haven't really examined all the contradictions in the ideology. I had not.
Kind of the zeal of the convert.
So
they've kind of woken to this ideology finally, consciously, and they're just like super into it. So they just push too hard.
Yeah.
Like a religion.
I have a
like
theory.
A
I have a theory that I presented to when I did the panel with like Blair White and Buck Angel and all them, right? About trans people, but I think it's not just critical gender theory. And this is a hypothesis, okay? But I think science might prove me right at some point. I think it's a pretty good hypothesis. So most people have heard of narcissistic personality disorder. What most people haven't heard about is that, especially in Europe, they're doing a lot of research on two different classifications of narcissistic personality disorder. One is the typical NPD that we think of, which is grandiose narcissism. Think Trump, right? There's not really a better popular person that's like a toxic narcissist than like Donald Trump. It was the greatest. I went in here and I said, wow, we're the greatest doctors. Like it was like, he's just a narcissist, like, which is what kind of made him a good president in some ways, because he was more worried about his legacy than he was worried about, corporate money or certain interests. He was more worried about being the populist guy that fixed America. But nevertheless, right, there's another type of narcissism, and this is known as vulnerable covert narcissism. And so vulnerable covert narcissism, for anybody that doesn't know, is essentially the same thing as narcissism, but instead of thinking I'm the greatest, what you actually think is I'm a special victim, that I'm uniquely oppressed and people hate me because of how special and great I am. And I think critical gender theory, when we look at the data, we find that narcissism and borderline personality disorder and covert vulnerable is often seen as something that's in between these two. Is exceedingly high, orders of magnitude higher in the transgender community than it is in the general population. Like, some data seems to suggest that there are more vulnerable covert narcissists in the trans community than exist in the world, because by estimation, because we're not adequately capturing all the people with NPD because of how many of them are in that are trans. I mean, I think some of the lowball estimates is something like 20% have a cluster B personality disorder. And that is insane.
I think that's low.
That's the lowest. That's those lowest estimates. Yeah, there's some studies that show 40%. There's one in from Tehran that shows like 88%. But I just don't fucking trust Iran to give me accurate LGBT research. Sorry, just fair enough. But what I think is happening at a smaller scale is that this ideology teaches a moral system where you claim an identity status as a victim, and you now reinterpret the world through that identity status, and you create a superposition, a mythology, a fantasy world that creates this inherent oppression of others, right? So for critical race theory, it's whiteness is a construct, and we can utilize the dialectic to reorganize the structure, but even while we maintain those contradictions, we'll never fix it until whiteness and race is destroyed, or we'll never fix gender until heteronormativity is destroyed and cis people maintain the superposition. It's all reimagined Marxism. But what I think it's doing to the woke left, and the reason I think people get trapped in it so hard, is it's giving them tendencies and traits of vulnerable covert narcissistic personality disorder, and they build themselves up on it. And much like a narcissist, in order to destroy that ideology, they have to go through narcissistic collapse. They have to reimagine who they are as an individual and come to terms with their entire interpretation of the world as a false fantasy that they have constructed. And they have to realize that they are not the moral agent that they once thought they were, that they're actually a piece of shit. And so they go deeper into this ideology and deeper into their own narcissism, to the point where I think they almost force themselves with ideological capture to be clinically narcissists that are unable of escaping an ideology because they're unable of escaping their own narcissism. And they've developed cluster B from this. And I think that is the real strength of critical theory and the woke movement and the cult, and why it pulls people in and clutches so tightly to them. Even when you show them facts and reason and logic, they have to deny it, or they're forced to go through terrible trauma.
Yeah. You said a lot there, and I agree with all of it. I mean, that's my opinion. I think it has a lot of overlap with Cluster B. I think you can understand woke by understanding personality disorders better. There's a book that we're reading for the Deprogrammed Book Club.
Maybe
right now
not histrionic.
Well,
except for maybe Drag Queen Story Hour.
Yeah, Drag Queen Story Hour, exhibitionists, you know, look at me. But political ponerology. Have you heard of this book?
You told me about it, and I was like, fucking what?
This would be up your alley. You may have heard of it, Horror. It was recommended to me by Nina Infinity. It's an old book. It's about, the subtitle is The Science of Evil, Psychopathy, and Totalitarianism. Understanding totalitarian, and it's basically looking at it's exactly what you're talking about. It's looking at cycles in human history and sort of mass psychosis and times throughout history where large groups of people have supported and behaved in evil ways, supported evil and behaved in evil ways. And the writer says, look, we've looked at totalitarianism through a historical lens, and we've looked at it through a political lens, but we haven't looked at it through a psychological lens, and we need to, because if you can understand sociopath, then you can understand totalitarianism. It's really interesting. It's like Cluster B. And
so what does that say about the Satanic Panic and the similarities to what we're going through now? Because I think about that like from a libertarian perspective, right? I think about what it like triggers in me is this need for a paternalistic state, right? And this idea that like the government is supposed to take care of you. And I see that as many ways tied to the Satanic Panic is, you know, this unnecessary need for a paternalistic, state entity to come into your life, and this kind of social kind of call to action from the government and from authorities and from organizations to fix this evil that is coming in, when really it's like, no, you're a shitty parent and your kid plays D&D because he's a nerd and because he'd rather hang out with his nerd friends than do the shit that you want to do with him because you're a shitty parent. We don't need the government here.
Does somebody else want to answer that? Because I think my answer might be a little different.
I don't have kids, so I'm pretty out of it.
Dooby probably has a couple kids. He doesn't know about them, but
look,
no, Francois.
If I don't know about them, they don't exist. Okay.
I only have dogs, so yeah.
Is it just me? Am I the only parent here? Fucking every panel on these terminally online places, I'm the only fucking parent.
I'm trying.
I'm a dog
a bunch
parent.
of incels.
Say a prayer.
Fish parent.
Look, motherfucker. I have fish too, okay? And I would murder all of those fish in a heartbeat to stop my child from like a scratch.
It's true. I have like a really large koi fish pond, like really, really, really large. And I've considered just like taking one out and seeing what it tastes like one day. So yeah, right. I'm sure you don't think about that with your kid.
How many bodies deep would you say that your koi pond is? Like, how many 8-year-olds deep do you think it is?
A lot of 8-year-olds. It's like 6 feet deep in some places, and it's like 30 feet long. It's
God damn! Wow.
A big pond.
Yeah.
Hope it's lined with lime.
Well, here's my answer.
The fish are alive.
Fair enough.
Here's my answer to your question, Scott. And some people would disagree with me. I am coming from a Christian perspective, so
look, pause.
I think
my chat in community is like, just because I'm a hardcore libertarian, Twitch is so fucking devoid of anyone that isn't a communist. Like, I have most of my audience are like Christians and conservatives and paleo libertarians. Like, okay, a majority of my audience is not libertarian.
Well, I always feel like I go into these conversations. At some point I need to stop doing it, but people have word Christian comes with a lot of baggage because of people who used it, because of authoritarians who use Christianity, like they use anything, like they use woke, like there are con artists and there are people who want to hurt others who will use any sincerely held beliefs of others or a belief system to wield power. And so I know that word comes with a lot of baggage, and so I don't know. I always give a big caveat beforehand.
All right, so
my point is, there's
this amazing book.
Okay.
Let Carrie go.
We like.
Look, there was a little bit there. I have Bluetooth headphones too. There was just delay. I kept accidentally interrupting. Okay. Please go.
Well, okay. I think the roles. I think basically you've got the government, you've got parents, and you've got the church. And I think society has functioned best when. Now this is saying when there's always going to be corruption, but I think society has functioned best when the government simply enforces the laws. The parent's role is to raise healthy, strong children. It's not the government's job to do that. And then the church advises the parents and the government. Now, you've seen abuses of those roles throughout history, of course, and we were talking about the Inquisition earlier, and they can get out of balance and out of whack. I think we're at a point in history currently where, at least in the U.S., you've got the government has taken over the other two roles entirely. The government is like, hey, we're here to enforce the laws and be the parent and to offer moral and spiritual advice about how to be a better person. Like, it's all us. It's all the government. And it's out of whack. That's, I don't know if
I'll just say to that real quick. You know, when Ancapistan is finally built, we will very happily forcibly remove you from our property so that you can go to the Christian covenant community where everyone there wants to be a Christian and they voluntarily choose to live in their own Christian community, right? And we'll do things like trade technology with you because you Luddites are so far behind. And like
casseroles, you can casseroles.
Right. You can bring us the things like, and while we're eating our TV dinners because we're more focused on our materialistic, technological, transhuman society, you can bring us the mac and cheese casseroles that can only be made right in the Christian covenant community. And you just do you and we'll do us, and you leave us the fuck alone with your goddamn government rules. All right.
Casserole really is the whitest American dish.
Tuna casserole.
Tuna casserole. Tuna
casserole specifically.
No, just
really
any casserole, really.
There are so many good cultural casseroles.
No, I've been invited to a black cookout more than once. All right, and they have casseroles too.
Yeah.
And they're good. The sweet potato one with marshmallows on top, because that doesn't count.
Okay,
no, that's
that is usually
that's Thanksgiving.
As a South Carolina.
No, not it.
It's delicious. It's
just an unrelated question.
This has already gone off the rails. Like, let's go.
Yeah, well, it's actually like closer to the rails. So Scott, I was watching earlier, right, when you guys were streaming, and I heard you make references to Biden and his ice cream, and the Neapolitan ice cream with a slightly bronzed or whatever. And it sounded like you guys were referencing back to like Pizzagate, right, with like the hot dogs, and it was like $65,000 on like Hawaiian hot dogs or some crazy shit like that.
Yeah, so I was cheekily referencing that because we're talking about the Satanic Panic, and there are some similarities between the wilder QAnon groups and the Satanic Panic. I think they're very similar. The difference is that QAnon's very isolated. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of Q people.
Well, it's not just like that was going on before QAnon, right? Like you have like
there's the founders.
Bohemian Grove. Well, yeah, sure, but you have like the Bohemian Grove where they have like these rituals and where they do like the cremation of care, where they have like a human effigy that's screaming. So there are like, if the government or the elite, quote unquote, were attempting to dissuade people from the idea that there is anything satanic going on in the government, it seems strange that they will be doing like the spirit cooking thing with Marino Abramovic, or the Bohemian Grove thing, or the really I don't know how much you know about like about John Podesta and the art that he has in his house with like naked children on the walls, and he has like Jeffrey Dahmer victims, I think it is, like statues of them with their heads off.
Bill Clinton in a dress as well.
Yeah, it's very strange people, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, so I'm wondering if you think
Marina is without a doubt the most strange. She's also highly connected with Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yeah. She well, fuck, I'm trying to remember back. It was like Hillary Clinton was talking about going to like a spirit cooking event in the emails. And at those spirit cooking events, they have like I think if you were trying to make something look satanic, that looks pretty satanic, right? They have like
one of the main things they do is they have
corners.
One of the main things that they do that's the most ridiculous in some of those spirit cooking rituals that Marina sets up is they have like 18-year-old girls who tend to look younger than 18. So we'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're 18, with like pigtails and stuff, and they lay nude on the table with a bunch of food on them, and the food is meant to symbolize like portions of their body, and like it's meant to look like blood and guts and things like that, and they eat off of the person's nude body to symbolize taking the virginity of the woman as a part of a cleansing ritual for politicians to go through. And yeah, you couldn't get more like, you know, like trying to prove that these people are Satanists.
Yeah, so I wonder, because like if like, this had come out,
Jeffrey
like,
Epstein has the owl over top of his fucking over top of his island, which is like the Owl of Moloch with the same fucking thing.
No, hang on. It could just be a reference to the dollar bill, because there's a little owl in one of the corners on the dollar bill.
Yeah, I wonder how that got
so
there.
it really could just be he's worshiping money. And honestly, you know, they say that money is the root of all evil, but it's not. It is the lust of money that is the root of all evil. And
Mark is over here trolling.
That's the true Satan.
Stop trolling.
Well, I wonder, like, because like I feel like if that stuff had come out in the 80s or 90s, right, you'd have a fucking huge uproar, right?
Right.
And I wonder, like, do you think that the fact that the Satanic Panic happened, and that there were a lot of things that weren't satanic that were like tarred and feathered this way, there are like aspects or like people within the government that might actually be like kind of fucked up, weird Satanist types, right? That are actually into this stuff, who are now getting a pass because nobody wants to call them out because they don't want to be labeled like a crazy Christian fundamentalist or something.
Or like the fucking McCarthy. Like McCarthy got fucking painted with this brush despite finding all of these fucking spies in the State Department, who, by the way, the overwhelming majority of them, there were thousands, by the way. The overwhelming majority of them, what? Why is it not? There we go. For some reason, what? Discord is only picking up like some of what I'm saying now. The overwhelming majority of them. Oh, okay. It wasn't lighting up on my end. So the overwhelming majority of these people were like, they just got shifted around. And it's like, it's really interesting how the painting of McCarthyism makes it to where if you try and talk about infiltration of academia or government institutions or things like that, you get painted with this brush where they're like, oh, you're fucking engaging in the Red Scare, you're engaging in McCarthyism. And like, so there is kind of a similarity there, like how after the Satanic Panic, you know, there's this idea that if you talk about the FBI documents on the founders and you're like, hey, the FBI's own documents shows that in Virginia, in Arlington, the CIA owned an underground facility where children were kept in cages and trained on how to sexually exploit, foreign dignitaries, and were, did these rituals with goats' heads and shit like that. And that's publicly available information. You can just read through the founders' documents on the FBI's own website, and it's a shit show to get through, and it's like 2,000 documents. But if you read it, it's all there. That's not even like Alex Jones being like, oh, I got the documents right here. Like it's literally just there, publicly available, but you can't touch it now because of the Satanic Panic, because you're just a wacko, because you're just a conspiracy theorist. And so I do wonder if there is something to be said about how these moral panics, our reaction, our pendulum swift, makes us unable to be able to call out those things when they do occur.
Or it could be something like that there was some truth to this, right, when it was going on, but this was overblown by the media back then, and maybe the attention was shifted somewhere else. And now that this is, we've gone through this, we understand that was a stupid thing to do. The elements of truth that were there are the people that are actually doing this kind of stuff. Now they get to use this as a shield whenever, if somebody ever criticizes their activity, right? I think that seems to be what happened with like McCarthy, because even if you're like you are like not a communist or Russian like sympathizer, right? It's very damaging, I think, to the image of the American government to admit that we were infiltrated by a bunch of communist spies, right? So
in the president's cabinet, like we had communist spies in the president's cabinet that Herbert Hoover was warned about, or sorry, that Edgar Hoover warned, the president Wilson at the time, and he said it was silly.
Right. So I think they'd have an interest, even if they aren't on the side of the communists or the Russians or whatever. They'd have an interest in suppressing it and saying that you're crazy, because they don't want people to know that this was even possible, right? So they'll bury it on that end. On both sides, this is something that's being suppressed.
I don't know. I wonder if there is something to that. Like, it was interesting because Carrie said when we talked about it earlier, like, why isn't this a movie? Right? Because the Pumpkin Patch Papers with Whittaker Chambers and like the espionage and like the Russian spy that defects to the FBI and like the documents and the communications and like what is the original CIA? The OSS?
OSS, Operative Office of Special Services?
Yeah, the OSS cutting deals with like European nations to get, communications. Like it's an insane, like it would make an amazing movie. It would make an awesome movie.
There was an OSS agent who
why not?
bought a battleship and just used it on missions. He just sailed around the Caribbean in a battleship.
But I mean, like, that would be an amazing movie, but it's like, why hasn't that movie been done? Well, it's weird that there's political interest in maintaining a narrative about McCarthy and about the Red Scare that provides a certain cover. And so, one does think, is there some truth to the Satanic Panic? Was there a little bit of this going on? Were there some people doing some things? And is it possible, right? That there's a similar, is it that there is something similar about maintaining the idea that the Satanic Panic was nothing and that it was just this crazy moment in history, and that anything that you could even connect to that is wrong, that does provide some shield for some crazy people that, like, maybe 1% of what Q says is true?
Oh, I completely believe that. I think I'm one of these people, maybe this has happened to you, but because of my podcast and because, I don't know, leftists don't like anyone who's no longer in the woke cult, I get called right wing. I get called, all the usual slurs, Nazi, all that stuff. One of the things I get called is a QAnon person, and for the longest time, it was funny because I would say, I really didn't even know what Q was, and I didn't want to search for it because I didn't want to know. And so they would say, like,
at least you're honest.
Q, and I was like, I don't want to know what it is. And no, I'm not, because I don't even know what it is. So I finally researched it, and I watched a documentary. It was a left-leaning documentary, but I thought they did a great job. I think it was HBO. And the more I learned about it, I was like, okay, these people are caught up in this complete con, and I don't believe Q was feeding them real information. I think they believe a lot of crazy stuff. I've since met some people who still believe, like, even though it's sort of disbanded, people are on Telegram and all these other places now, they believe some crazy stuff.
For sure.
But I do think buried in there, yes, there's a kernel of truth somewhere that draws people in, and I do think that, well, like you're saying, Dooby, because I had come away from Satanic Panic thinking, this is crazy, none of this ever happened, and wow, this is another example of just moral panics run amok, that I just completely wrote, whenever I would hear anything about pedophilia rings, or what, I was like, that sounds like crazy conservative conspiracy theories. And now, having said, I'm this person who's having to reevaluate everything I think I know. And the Jeffrey Epstein story, there have been so many stories of pedophilia in the news in the past few years, and so many examples
where's that list? Ghislaine Maxwell had a list. Like, were we doing something with these people?
Yeah.
So many examples of Seville. What's his name? The British guy.
I was actually just going to bring
Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile. Yeah, so many cases of where you see powerful pedophiles being protected by powerful people for whatever reason that I'm like, you know what? I think there's some truth to this. I haven't had time to really delve into all of it. I think there was even probably truth to some of the Pizzagate stuff. That doesn't mean I think Pizzagate was real. And it doesn't mean I think under the Comet Ping Pong they had kids and were holding kids there or anything. But I do believe I've read some of the Podesta emails. Some of them are hard to explain.
You just need to look at James Alefantis, the owner of that of Comet Ping Pong. He's a very strange person. Pizza pizza restaurant had drawings of naked children on the walls with red bottoms, right, like red butts. He was posting pictures of children on his Instagram with tape on their wrists, taped to a table. His name is literally Alan Fantis, which is the infants. He's a very strange character, right? So I don't know how you could get into that and not say, hey, maybe there's some truth to this,
right?
And it's interesting that you brought up Jimmy Savile, because one of the things that really got me thinking about this is recently Netflix had a documentary about Jimmy Savile, and they went through his history, his time on
Did they
TV.
mention Peter Sutcliffe by any chance?
I don't think they do. In fact, one of the things go ahead.
Because he was known to have worked at Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, was at a mental asylum or prison that Jimmy Savile was volunteering at, and they the staff noticed that they were very chummy.
Yeah, no, they didn't mention that. But another thing they also didn't mention is how there are many reports from former police officers in the UK who said, hey, we were trying to investigate this. We got a report. We're trying to investigate, and a higher up told us to stop. We were threatened. We were told not to work on this, to leave it alone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. None of that was mentioned in the documentary. And these people to this day say, hey, we were looking into this, and we were told to stop, right? So somebody came into my office and said, hey, leave that case alone. Don't touch it, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact that was left out, fact that was left out of the documentary is insane. I don't know how you tell that story without pointing out the fact that he was very well protected for a very long time.
I don't want people to know. That's how.
There was also do you remember what that documentary was with those? Oh God, those children in what was that town, Mark? Where the kids were
Boys Town?
Yes.
Yeah,
Boys
Town.
Yeah, Boys Town, USA.
Boys Town, USA. There's
richest
so
square
many
mile in America.
Right. Not only are these all of these kids that came out saying that they were shuttled around for parties with the rich elite and gone into DC. It's and brought to these parties to be entertainment for the wealthy elite. But one of the guy's brothers just happens to have a plane crash with the private, or sorry, no, the brother's murdered, and the mysteriously, and the investigator that was investigating all of these connections happens to have a plane crash that crashes under mysterious circumstances that don't match in the Franklin cover up. And they came within 2 hours and took every single piece of the plane and locked it away so that no one can look at it. There's certainly some things there that Q have attached to that are real, and there are some things that are wild with no basis. And I do think that moral panics and our reactions to them leave us in a weakened state to being able to properly investigate things that very well could be true but sound fantastical, because we're numb to the fantastical.
Yeah, I think the average person who hears about the spirit cooking stuff, or John Podesta and his Book of Naked Children and the statues of murder victims, I think most people are going to hear them oh, you're insane. How could you possibly believe that? But that is actually documented true. It's just true that this happened, right? So I don't know. I think there's something to that, and I think it's very interesting to me that we were told, when the Epstein thing happened, right? When the investigation was starting,
I'm listening.
Yeah, was that there was a list, there was a book, there's a black book, right? He had names, and he had like dirt on all these people, and this was part of the investigation. And he dies, and we never hear about that again. And now Ghislaine Maxwell, she apparently had access to this too. She's in prison. We never hear about this. Didn't come up at all in the investigation. Like, how is that possible? Like, how is it possible that
is it even in the evidence list?
No. Yeah, it's like the amount of the powerful people, politicians, artists, executives, etc., that were going back and forth to that island for years, right? And there's not a shred of anything when we're meant to believe that this guy. There's a flight
manifesto. We know Bill Clinton went there. What was it, like 27 times he wrote on the Lolita Express?
And we're meant to believe that this dude who's like himself a very powerful, very influential a person, right? Who's basically given a house for worth millions of dollars, right? And of course, that's not questioned. This guy didn't keep any dirt on any of these people in that black book that they were talking about. He had nothing. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, I wonder, like, I don't know. I wonder, like, if it'd be reasonable to say that, yeah, the old Satanic Panic was bad, but maybe we need a new one. maybe we need to do it right this time.
Oh, fucking Dooby. No, because I think
it's like,
look, I'm going to be a libertarian here, and I'm just going to fucking do it. Like, the problem is that you have a monopoly on all of these fucking systems, and that's what you get. Like, when you petition to have this monopolistic government, well, then you have one entity that controls the investigation of these really high crimes, right? Sure, you have your local police department, but like, who's looking into sex trafficking rings? It's just the FBI. There's nobody else. And Ashton Kutcher, right?
He actually does that a lot.
And he does it better than the FBI more often. But it's such a weird passion project. But I mean, but you get what I'm saying, right? Is that, like, when you have one group of people that has supreme authority to investigate a specific type of crime, well, what the fuck do you expect? That they wouldn't be? How do we maintain them from being how do we keep them incorruptible? With checks and balances? I mean, sure, it's a cool Band-Aid, but like, it doesn't fucking work. Nobody wants to go. No one wants to hop on that one. All right, I just guess that means I'm right.
I don't know. No, I'm trying to think of like how you'd fix that problem, and I can't think of a way that, because like, if you said it's just the FBI. Well, if one of these people at the top of the FBI is involved, well, then you're screwed, right? So like, what do you do?
You get rid of the FBI.
I'll tell you something. Naive me, just a few short years ago, I was under the impression that people generally work their way up into leadership positions in the government or media or what have you by being good people and making good connections and good people rewarding good people. And it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that I realized it's actually bad people probably who are rising to the top because they have to have the powerful want to have something on you. And so if they know that they've got dirt on you because they've enticed you to come to a party with something that is unmentionable, or if they have video footage of you, or if they've, if they're Epstein and they've arranged for you to be somewhere, it's sort of like it just was a mind flip for me. And I know for some people that's going to sound very naive, but I used to kind of be like, oh, well, no, like you develop a good reputation, and then your good reputation helps you get into these leadership positions. And it's like, no, it's completely the opposite. It's like, the filthier you are, of course they're going to be more powerful people than you who want to help you, because if they know you're filthy and they know the skeletons in your closet, they know they can control you with those skeletons. And so
maybe,
of course they're going to.
I don't know. I don't know that it's necessarily like that, right? I'm a big fan of George Carlin, right? And one of the things I love to quote from him often is, you don't need a conspiracy when like interests align. right? And so I don't know so much that you have to be like dirty or that they have to have dirt on you, because that's also a risk, right? Because if you bring people under you that are really dirty, sure, you have the blackmail on them, which keeps them, under your control. But also if that gets exposed, then you expose yourself by the nature of it. And so what I think,
it's also a motivation for backstabbing.
right. And so what I think is more likely, and I don't doubt that exists for sure. What I think is more likely is that those people that are willing to, I think people get into it sometimes for the right reasons, but they're into it for power and they're into it to win. And then you need to make certain compromises with interests in order to win. And you can only make so many compromises before you're just not on the right side, even from a consequentialist perspective, right? Like you can only take that check and, yeah, sure, I'll sign this bill, even though I don't really agree with it because, I'm doing the greater good, right? And you can only do the greater good so many times before you're really just doing the greater evil. And as you do that, and as you do the greater good, those with more power and more influence let you into those spaces as they see that you're the type of person willing to engage in that behavior, right? So it's like you're never gonna let a Rand Paul into the other meetings, right? Like you'll be there on the floor, you'll be there in the committees that we choose for you, but like the behind closed door conversations, you're not one of us, right? But when Nancy Pelosi finds out that you're one of us, all of a sudden you can know about what the Department of, what the National Security Administration's actually doing. So I think it's a little of both.
Well, let's not act like the DC rumor mill doesn't exist. Like, there has to be some inkling, even for new new congresspersons and new bureaucrats, about the weird shit that these people get up to. I feel like there's not really true secrets in DC, in a place like that, in a place that's filled with spies and politicians and bureaucrats where information, any little shred of information can get you ahead of people in such a power hungry place.
I don't know.
It's hard to give anyone leeway in that world when you consider like all the information that they're privy to. Like there has to be people talking about parties that happen.
And yet, where's Ghislaine Maxwell's list, right? You know what I mean? And yet we do know that there is
people would burn for it.
Right. But at the same time, we do know that there is at least some individuals that have collaborated together in some capacity to do terrible and horrific shit, but they have enough power to protect themselves. So it's kind of a like, I don't know. I think we're both right. I think I think we tend to overblow it because, the unknown is scary. We don't actually know. We have inklings, we have evidence that points to, we have things that suggest, we have some facts that we know there has to be some explanation for, but yet we don't really have all of the facts. And so I think the fear and the anxiety about what that might be tends to have, because as a species, right, anxiety has evolved as a protective mechanism. The whole point of anxiety is, your friend gets bit by a brown recluse as a caveman and he dies, right? And now you develop arachnophobia. Well, it's not actually every spider that bites you that's a problem, but you overblow it. Well, okay, yeah, but you overblow.
No, you're absolutely wrong using spiders. Every time a spider bites you, that's a fucking problem.
It's a huge problem.
You get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying, right? Like some spiders can bite you and you're not going to fucking die, right? Like most spiders can bite you and you're not going to die. But it's healthy to have a healthy skepticism of every spider, because until you really know, all of a sudden every spider is a poisonous spider. And I think maybe we do the same thing with politicians, because we know unequivocally, and maybe I'll get banned from Twitch from this, who knows when the fucking ban hammer will come, but we know that at least some of these powerful people are pedophiles that work together to keep themselves, and we know at least some of them are insane, ritualistic, satanic-like people. And so, but when we don't know who they are, all of a sudden we have a tendency to think every politician is this. because that's the safest thing for us as a species. That's the point of anxiety. And I think that's what happens in a satanic panic, maybe. What happens in a woke panic is that every daycare is a satanic cult that wants to molest my kids. Because why? Because moms are going to work now and they have to leave their children with strangers, some of whom are men, some of whom are child molesters. And the appropriate response to that is, in some ways, is every man is a child molester. Every daycare is a satanic place that's going to kill my kids or like do crazy shit to my kids because I'm leaving my children alone with strangers.
You can't get banned from Twitch for saying that, by the way, because Dennis Hastert, there you go, there's one that we know was a pedophile. Remember how you said you're new to the Twitch game? It is It is so adorable that you think that you can't get banned off of Twitch because what you said was true. You will be screaming into the void, banned, going, "Why are you mad? Why are you booing? I'm right." I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
So.
But like, what do you guys think about that idea of anxiety and the conspiracy and like the element of truth?
I think
you're
that's
probably right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think you're right. So I think that there's like it does make sense, right? So like if we know that a certain percentage of the daycares are going to molest your kids, but we don't have a way to tell which ones, and we don't feel like, we have a good way to vet these daycares. Well, then all of them are bad, and you need to avoid all of them, right? Like that just makes sense to do as a parent, right?
Right.
So yeah, and I think you can expand from that to, the politicians, that they're not just pedophiles, and they're not just pedophiles that are into weird, kinky cult shit. They're summoning demons and sucking the souls out of my kids, right? Like I think it's not like impossible to make that leap.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's what like leads to a moral panic, right? It is 2%, but the rational decision for a parent is to constantly worry that they're in the 2%. And then the moment there's an inkling that the 2% is present, the portion of the brain that says, if it's 2%, then it's all. If I have to choose between one, that mechanism of protection overblows something. But I think it's an important element of overblowing something because it's a protective factor for us. So let's take for example, heavy metal music, right? Heavy metal music is good in my opinion. I love it, right? But there are some satanic references into it. It does show an anger. It does show a change in the culture. It does show a disconnection with the values that we once had. And so the anxieties as a parent to see your child go from the world that you remember to a world where there's kids are smoking in the bathrooms at school, like talking about Gen Xers, right? To a world where they're wearing these crazy clothes, to a world where, where there's all of these things, all of a sudden, there's an element of truth, but truth it's not always a one-to-one comparison, right? It's the anxiety is true. The fear is true. The something is off is true, even if the accusations and the fears themselves aren't true. Even if the satanic panic is a lie, what is true is you're seeing the beginning of a degeneracy in your culture. You're seeing your culture fall apart. You're seeing a generation of people that are the first generation in American history to do worse than their parents. You're seeing something wrong and you can't identify it. And because you can't identify it, it's unknown. And so there's almost something healthy about the satanic panic in the sense that it's a reaction that says something's fucking wrong. Look for a solution. And that panic is the wrong solution, but it's born from our brains going, I see something. I don't know what it is, but I'm scared.
Do you think there's going to be a reaction to all of the woke moral panic and the woke censorship and the woke indoctrination of children in public schools? And because it sounds like you might be saying there's going to be some kind of moral panic that comes more like from the conservative side, where it's like,
That's my biggest
and
fear.
I think some of that's justified.
I'm more worried about the right wing than I am the left, because when you look at a typical normal mom, like a Moms for Liberty type person, right? That's just kind of getting involved in this. And I go to you and I'm like, okay, let me show you wokeness. And they go CRT, right? And I'm like, no, we got to look at critical theory. We got to look at how it ties to the Frankfurt School. We got to look at WPATH. We got to look at UNESCO. We got to look at the fact that school choice, in my opinion, is a means of letting UNESCO and SICUS and NSES eventually allow the teachers unions and the voters to take over your private schools. And the only thing you're gonna be able to do is you start telling them all this shit. Here? Yeah, sorry.
Deb? Hey, Deb, how you doing?
Leave me alone. But like, you get what I'm saying, right? You tell them all of these institutions are rotted. And the right answer, as far as I'm concerned, right, is a change in the culture, a change in the philosophy, separating from these institutions peacefully, going into private schools, going into homeschools, right, calling for reduction in taxation. But I think the typical right-wing reaction to this is going to be, it's all corrupt? Well, then burn it down. Burn it down and institute hardcore right-wingers that the moment they see any level of woke, they will fire them and they will put them in jail, because these people are coming after my fucking kids and I'm ready to put these people in prison. And like, I worry that becomes the reaction. I worry that the left is waking a sleeping giant and they don't understand what they're fucking with, because they're fucking with people's kids and they're not going to respond rationally. They're going to burn all of you fuckers to the ground, and the people will be in prison for no fucking reason. People that have some misaligned ideas will be in jail. There will, like, it will not be fucking pretty. And I say this to right wingers, and they like, and like people like Blair White, they're like, oh, come on. And I'm like, look at fucking Texas. It's already illegal to get HRT at 20. A 20-year-old doesn't have freedom of their body. Like, this is the beginning of shit that I'm afraid of. Sorry,
I can totally agree with that, because I've seen, I live in just a tiny little town, and it's always been one of the things that scares me sometimes, especially watching some of the local politicians on Facebook, is their capacity for vengeance as opposed to actually trying to fix the situation. They go immediately to punishment and punish until they're dead, as opposed to trying to look at the heart of I mean, in many ways, the left, it can be the same, but you're right. When it comes to screwing with somebody's kids, you're always going to provoke a bigger reaction, because then you're talking about the future of their lineage, which the right has a little bit more of a concern about than the left tends to. So you're screwing with something that they see as part of the future. So their immediate reaction is to put it down hard, and put it down forever.
I mean, look at Scott. He said he would murder all his fish so his kid doesn't get a scratch.
You're goddamn right I would. like, and I mean, and then there's also the parent in me that says, fuck with my kids and you deserve ... TOS. And that's a hard instinct to fight against, right? And it's like, when you're talking about these deeply embedded cultural, philosophical phenomenons, there's also that fear in you that's like, is that the only way to get rid of it? Like, can we even get rid of it peacefully? Can we even get rid of it the way that I want to get rid of it? Or does it actually require, like a forest that needs to be healthy? Does it require a forest fire to burn the underbrush? I hope it doesn't, but it might.
You have to kind of accept there's always going to be some level of it, and you're always going to have to be fighting it. It's just like, to go with the thing of the forest fire, there's always going to be something there that's going to catch on fire. At some point, everything burns. So you can't set your eyes on absolute perfection, because that's just going to take you down an absolutely terrible path. You have to, at some point, accept that you are going to have to deal with people who want to do bad shit to other people, and finding a way to lessen their impact and be aware of them, as opposed to trying to remove them entirely.
I don't know, Dooby, you're the resident fascist here. Tell me what you think.
The frog.
Oh, you don't know Dooby.
I
Dooby.
Definitely. So I have that tendency within me. Okay.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard, like, I am very, very, very anti drug, for example. And yeah, I think like anti-drug, legalization. I'm very against the the trans kids thing. Very, very against a lot of this kind of stuff that's being pushed on the left these days, right? I'm like anti-porn too, like, and I think that my position on a lot of the stuff is that it does require the forest fire, or just like the hard line. Okay, here's where we are. This is bad. It stops now, and we pull this down and we remake it. So I definitely understand that tendency, and I think it's a real thing that exists, not just within me, as a pretty authoritarian dude, but I think within just like the average American, right? I think especially when you're dealing with things like you're messing with the kids. I think that tendency is going to come out, and I think that is a dangerous thing. It's so. I think that fear that Scott's pointing to, that's a real thing, and I think that a lot of people on the left, because they've had like the reins for the last a decade or so, it seems, they've forgotten what the right can be like when it's angry. Right?
Yeah, the right, like the way that I see the left is, the left is like this constantly moving thing, right? It's almost like I'm gonna get like weirdly fucking like Jordan Peterson-y, right? But like the best way to describe it is like it's like a feminine energy, right? It's kind of always thinking, always snapping, always going. It's very chaotic, right? And the right is very slow to move, slow to act, right? But when it hits, it knocks you the fuck out. And so like I'm worried that the left really, like, I'm with you. I'm very worried that the left thinks they can keep poking the bear, and they've forgotten it's a bear, that they're fucking poking a bear. I don't know any other way to describe it.
I mean, you're kind of seeing some of it with even like abortion, right? How some of these right-wing states a lot of these people are seeking to just ban it outright in all cases, right? So there's like no compromise, right, with some of these people.
Now, I'll say, as someone who...
Never mind, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was just saying, I think a big problem with it is on the right. Like you saw this with Trump getting elected. There's a big fuck you, like a big middle finger mentality on the right now.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
I wonder if a lot of these laws that are coming out right now is really what people would want if they were thinking calmly and rationally.
Yeah, that I agree that I don't think that it would be. I think there's like a fuck you. It's like, hey, you guys have been shaming us, shitting on our religion, our values, etc. You guys have taken over the culture, the media. You guys are replacing all of our heroes with your new woke versions of them, and race swapping them as if that like is, and as if that's not racist, because they're openly like anti-white in a lot of cases. So now it's like you reach a point where it's like, hey, we're tired of this. It's done, and now fuck you. I'm going to do 10 times worse, right, than what you did to me.
Nothing's more dangerous than a cornered animal,
or an animal that's protecting its child.
True.
Yeah, I mean those are
true.
It's like
there's a real reason they call it a mama bear, you know what I mean? Or the mama bear movement is that like you and that's another thing too.
I saw The Revenant.
So another thing that is interesting about the targeting of children, though, maybe a bit of a white pill, is that, I've spoken about this before, is that there's one voting block that is the easiest voting block to swing from one political party to the other, and that's white suburban women. This is the voting block you want to target pretty much in any election. This is the most important voting block, right? And the reason for that is that white suburban women very easily can switch from Republican to Democrat. They a lot of times they don't vote. They don't care to vote, but if they feel a reason to vote, they will vote. And if you do something, if they feel like their children are in danger in some way, they will switch from one party to the other, like almost instantaneously, if they feel that like one group is coming after their kids in some regard. And so like maybe a bit of a white pill in this moment is that instead of having this kind of like right-wing anger and need to punish, what you really just end up with is you keep pushing it and white suburban women will stop voting for you overwhelmingly. Like that it will, like if you keep putting that pressure on, you're going to see like what happened in Loudoun County, Virginia, right? A county that was reliably 80% plus Democrat every year, right? In a purple state, because it's a DC suburb. It's where like rich white Democrats live, right? Like Loudoun County, Virginia is not a place for a Republican. It just isn't.
Well,
Nova in general, but there are some pockets like Alexandria is not that bad. Alexandria is like 55-45, right? And so this pocket, but what happened is you had that father, right, that went to the school and said, hey, my daughter was raped by this boy in a skirt in the bathroom. Please fix this. And they were like, the police are involved. We're going to fix this. They put them in a different school, monitoring them. And then they sexually assault another girl. And then he goes to a school board meeting and loses his shit, understandably, because they're covering up his own daughter being raped, and is yelling at them. The police come to escort him. He doesn't even really fight back, but kind of fights back a little bit, right? Resists arrest a little bit because he's like, no, motherfucker, blah, blah. So they kick him around, arrest him. And he's one of 13 cases that the largest teachers union in the country sends to Merrick Garland as a means for why we need the FBI investigating school board meetings. And Merrick Garland uses that as a means of putting a special designator towards parents that protest at these events, so the FBI can use the Patriot Act to target parents. What happened in that county is it went red. It went fucking an 80% blue county voted for Governor Youngkin. Now, Governor Youngkin's a fucking pushover rhino, fucking blue little fairy that doesn't understand any of this philosophy at all anyways. And he's like, I did a CRT ban. We're good. Like he's an idiot. Like a lot of fucking rhinos and Republicans. They don't understand what they're up against. But nevertheless, I do wonder if poking at the children, the white pill is, you're just going to lose the white suburban vote, and it's going to be rough, and it's going to be a lasting impression.
It's not just the white suburban vote. It's also one of the things I was going to say about, what you were talking about, maybe of that kind of like that impulse that people have sometimes to say, I don't care if it swings the other way. I'm afraid of it swinging the other way really hard. I am. But at the same time, I do understand it because I see, even in me or in some of my friends, I have friends who are lifetime progressives who have started voting straight Republican down the ticket because they want Texas to appear so red and so hardline that people from blue states stop moving here. And it's sort of like, that's hard to understand, I think, like what's going on in the mind of a person who would do that, but not if you live in a state that's you're watching the culture change and you're watching the policies change from an influx of people who have different values. Even if you've always shared those values and you've always considered yourself progressive until recently. I don't know if I'm explaining this well. When the abortion ban, when Roe v. Wade happened and it reverted back to the states, for example, I'm someone who's pro-choice. I do think there should be limitations, though. I'm pro-choice to an extent. And my views on it have changed a lot in the past few years, and they're still in flux. I can tell they're still in flux. I do have a big issue with the government telling a woman what she can and can't do with her body. I also have an issue, and I think it's immoral when a woman kills a fetus, kills a baby. I do. It's just not everything that's immoral. I don't think everything that's immoral should also necessarily be illegal. And anyway, I think you understand my sticking point with it. The point being,
all I gotta say is, really, if you ever want to have a nerdy day, we can explain evictionism to you.
Oh no!
You sound like you might be an evictionist.
I don't know what that is.
Convertible.
But my point being, as someone who believes that up until a certain point, at which point the baby can survive outside the womb, and science keeps pushing that date earlier and earlier, I believe it should be legal up until that point. I don't care. If Texas is like no abortions for anyone, I don't care. I can feel that in me. I don't care because I want the woke to see Texas, the version of Texas that they try to present on Twitter and online, where they're like, Texas is so crazy. It's like The Handmaid's Tale there, and oh, it's awful. I'm like, yes, run with that. I want you to think it's like that because I don't want you coming here, and I want you to quit changing these small towns. I want you to quit. Californians are not just moving to Austin, they're moving to places like Georgetown now. And because of the overflow from Austin, Austinites are moving up to Georgetown. So it's like, I don't know, on one level, I'm like, yeah, get more restrictive. Because maybe
that's
why they should move to the sundown
Yeah.
towns that are on the Texarkana border.
No, that's why I'm a libertarian, right? Is because as a libertarian, like I want us to have freedom of association. I want private property owners to be able to collectively come together, voluntarily live in a community, and then be like, we don't want your kind here, whatever your kind is, even if it's racial, because let the racists have their own little racist town and let them fucking economically suffer because they're stupid, and let fucking, Texas have their Texas shit, and let Californian people have their hippie places. Like this idea that like a government in DC gets to tell Alaskans how to live their fucking life, or that is insane. Alaska ought to be able to be like, no, go fuck yourself, leave us alone. But I'm the crazy radical.
That's why I'm in favor of, I was making a lot of memes for a while that were sort of like, whenever I would see a leftist meme about Texas, I would take it and run with it and just add "don't move here" to it. I'm like, it's horrible. Like, I have to put on my handmaid's outfit every day. That's just on the days my husband lets me leave the house.
Dude, I saw there was a billboard that was put in California that was like, don't move to Texas, that was paid for by some group. And it was
I agree with it.
they were referencing the Uvalde situation, saying that Texas can like protect your children. And I was like, yes, please keep your kids in downtown LA where gun violence is so much safer, and keep them out of Texas. Like, I was just like, that's so stupid, but whatever, man. You do you. Were you going to say horror?
They will use anything.
Oh, I was just laughing. I'm fine.
Oh, okay. I see how it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that there's something that we have to learn from the Satanic Panic, right? And one of those things that we have to learn, one of those many things that we have to learn, is the way we get swept up in these movements. And again, this is just a libertarian perspective, right? Like, oh my God, I can't think of the other Friedman. Milton Friedman, it says there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program, right? And we saw some of the nanny state things that occurred with the PMRC in the music industry, and they're just here now. They're here permanently, right? Like and I think that is an interesting thing too, is that like, what happens if we get through this moral panic of the left, right? And some of the reaction, or some of the other side's policies are just here now. They're just here, right? Like certain, like CASEL, for example, right? Social emotional learning. What if social emotional learning, like what if we get through it all and then the compromise at the very end is Republicans just accept social emotional learning? Like what do we do in a nation where each moral panic gives us a certain level of acceptance of the government coming in to protect us, right? And those pieces of that nanny state remain. Like, are moral panics a kind of agent of the state, or not an agent, but like beneficial to the state to like grab up some power to protect you from the thing that from your panic, and they just kind of stay there forever?
Yeah. I mean, they absolutely are.
Look, I can't keep fucking talking and then you guys just go, I agree, that was good. Like, fucking tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong, God damn it.
Scream at him.
I'm not used to this. I'm used to being on a fucking Twitch panel with like 7 leftists and then Dooby quietly sitting in the corner occasionally to say something wild and everyone being like, fuck you, you're wrong. Libertarians are pedos. And I'm just like, all right, let's go.
Oh, goddamn. I mean, you're here. You've gathered a selection of people that, for the most part, kind of align closely in thought, but
mean,
not
fair
exactly entirely. So you're not going to get the same kind of fight you're normally going to get.
I know.
It's
I'm curious what you guys think.
It's October.
Breathe.
Put on a mask.
There you go. Dooby always has a mask on.
Well, we have different opinions. Like and we could talk about the you want to live in your anarcho-capo camp without your casseroles, and I'm going to live in the Christian one. Like, we have differences, but I think on this issue we agree. I mean, I think the state will use any panic to scoop up more. They'll use anything to scoop up more power. Every tragedy, every panic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're always constantly looking for power. But I was going to say something, but then you interrupted me and I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
Not you, him. You're fine.
Oh, no. Yeah, so...
But no,
I'm kind of interested... Yeah. It's okay, Dooby. Like we can hang out for a couple more minutes and then get out of here. It's perfectly fine. I know Carrie can't stay a super long time either. Horror and I, we're different beasts. We're up till the sun comes up. But one of the things that I thought was interesting when like looking into some of the beginning rumblings, the setting of the stage, right, was how certain media things kind of began to influence this cultural shift. And one of the things that the sociologist was talking about in terms of like Dungeons and Dragons was Dark Shadows, right? There was this show that ran from 1966 to 71, that promulgated this reinterest in the cults and vampires and all of these things that then created like a swing from the other side. Because of the fear of those reignition of things. And like, I wonder, like, I kind of see almost a similar thing with like these TikTok influencers and Gen Z kids. Is like, there's this weird new medium that I see like putting ideological ideas in very young, impressionable people that like puts forward this ideology that is like this counterculture towards what millennials and Gen X and boomers want. And like, I wonder if like those same rumblings are there, those same kind of media influences that like spark that change in culture and how we deal with those.
Can you phrase that a different way? I'm just not sure I follow entirely.
So what I mean to say is that like a new media comes out and new kind of like new shows, new ways of engaging with a younger audience that promulgates a different culture, a different idea about how to live, different philosophy even, right? Because art represents our values. And you saw an upswing in people getting obsessed with cults and vampires and all of these things that really kind of brought in the fear from another generation. And while obviously, I think Dark Shadows and interest in cults is less pernicious than woke ideology. I see a kind of a similar thing with like TikTok. I see like a Gen Z being bombarded with all of these forms of media, and it's causing this kind of this cultural chasm between older millennials mostly and Gen X and boomers and like younger millennials and Gen Z that is creating these two kind of competing cultural narratives and crashes. And like, what can we learn from the Satanic Panic and what can we learn from other moral times where this has occurred?
You know, it's kind of funny because you went through that and I started thinking back to what Carrie was saying earlier, that, you know, these things are kind of cyclical. It seems like with every new media and everything, we kind of go through that same cycle, you know, where all of a sudden the new kids, the kids of this newest generation rediscover all these things that we maybe saw when we were young. And because they're presented in a new way, the older generation gets freaked out and starts to worry, maybe more than they should, and then you end up with that over emotional reaction that makes it louder and snowballs into that effect that then other parties can take advantage of to gain their own power. It's kind of it's just cyclical, because like you said, with every new kind of thing we come up with. I'm sorry, my brain is just so out of it. I've had a very long 2 days.
Yeah, I know your mom you've been dealing with that stuff, and I don't feel like I'm doxing anything when it's all over Twitter.
No, you're not. I already said it all, so it's not like you're not telling on anything.
Hope she's all right.
She's home today. There's nothing. They didn't find anything wrong, so it's been interesting. But yeah, so it comes around again and again, and I'm sure that back at the beginning of books, they were doing the same thing, and they did the same thing when radio came out, and the same thing again with TV and movies, and then TV, and now that you have the internet, everybody's rushing to blame all the troubles that come up that you notice in the world on that new phenomena. Meanwhile, these things that they're uptight about have literally existed forever. It seems new because it's being presented in a new way.
I don't talk about Christianity much, even though I went to Liberty University. but it kind of makes
a biblical scholar.
I'm not a biblical fucking scholar. I took a couple religion classes and went to Liberty. All right.
More than most people.
I mean, fair enough, but most hardcore Christians know more than I do, though. No, it kind of almost makes me think of like the Jewish rebellions and the Zealots under the Roman Empire. Like, I wonder if we fail to see this pattern when we look at it through a historical lens because of just the lack of data, right? Like, what if like, I almost like think about it and I'm like, yeah, it almost makes sense that like the Zealots would have been like a younger generation, sick of oppression from the Roman Empire, sick of their people being like cattled in. And there was an older kind of like accepting generation of priestly class that had like maintained enough wealth. They were like, hey, we have a good thing going here. We're allowed to practice our religion. We're allowed to like not even have to worship Roman gods. Like, we just have to pay our taxes and everything's good. And like that almost like kind of leads to that upheaval that brings about Christianity. Like you might even theorize that Christianity is born because of a younger generation, like having an entire moral kind of like upheaval from another generation. I don't know. It's something interesting to throw out there. That might be too deep in the cut. Too weird.
That's kind of how we do things here, though.
Everyone's just thinking.
Deep and strange.
Well, look, that was a fucking weird way to end it, but nevertheless, I appreciate everybody for coming. If you want to give like some outro, like talk for a little, yeah, for sure. I just want to give everybody like a minute to like say whatever they want to say and outro, and tell people where they can find you and stuff too. And Carrie, go ahead. You're chomping at the bit.
Okay, this wasn't going to be an outro, but I'll make it my outro. You said earlier that heavy metal music was getting this bad rap because it's kind of dark. And it just made me think of the Crazy Train lyrics, which I don't know if you've read those lyrics recently, but they're not dark. Ozzy Osbourne, it's like, let me just read this to you. Crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as foes. Maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. It's a metal song.
Yeah, no, I mean, also the devil.
I'm just hearing the intro in my head.
Crazy, yeah, but also War Pigs. War Pigs is is this song that's supposed to be this evil satanic song because it it features the devil's triad because it has a diminished fifth in it, and like there was all this like War Pigs is so evil. It's a fucking war protest song about how the rich send poor people off to go fight in war, and how like the poor are the ones that get fucked, and like we need to break this cycle of constantly going and calling for war in other countries because it's
a positive song.
Yeah.
Wouldn't life be so much better if people actually listened to the lyrics of old songs?
Well, to be fair, the lyrics of a lot of metal songs are difficult to understand.
There are some.
I'm not good at metaphors.
But that sounds like a John Denver lyric.
Yeah.
We're talking about John Denver. Scott hates John Denver. He thinks he's a hack fraud loser.
John Denver is a hack fraud. Fuck John Denver, but you know. That is
you
what
don't want to smoke a blunt to Rocky Mountain High and just hang out in the mountains.
Motherfucker is a goddamn fraud. He's nothing but a city boy trying to fucking sell people. He is literally the first metrosexual, like, country pop guy, except he's doing it in a folksy way, selling a fucking
and
lie.
He died in a plane crash like a true pioneer.
You know, I'm just saying, fuck John Denver.
My husband and I were talking about how positive his music is and then I was like, I wonder if he's like really, if he's not like that at all. And so we looked up some stuff. I didn't know very much about John Denver. And it turns out the guy who sang all those positive songs, he came home from tour once and his wife had chopped down some of his favorite trees. They were having a lot of problems. And so he took a chainsaw to their marital bed. He sawed their bed in half, the chainsaw. Rocky Mountain High. Like, I just figured.
Yeah, John Denver's a lying sack of shit. Fuck John Denver. You know what? No, like we're gonna go all out. All right, right at the end. All right, here's my fucking outro. Fuck John Denver. Fuck John Lennon, that commie little fuck, okay? Your music was okay at best. The Beatles fucking suck. And you know what else?
McCartney and Harrison
Led
did
Zeppelin.
better on their own.
You stole all your shit. Fuck all these bands. Out. Horror Amarada, you can go next.
Smith. Okay.
Oh, no. Yeah. Plug your channel. Plug your channel. Plug your stuff. I'm sorry. And plug the podcast and stuff you're working on.
And my name's Carrie. You can find me on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble. It's my podcast is called Deprogram with Carrie Smith, and it started as a series of interviews about my old belief system and leaving social justice and interviewing people about what is woke and coming at it from different angles. And you can find me at Deprogrammed or on Twitter at Real Carrie Smith.
Fair enough. Horror.
You can find me on Twitch, Twitter. Twitter is H Amarada. Twitch is obviously Horror Amarada. You can also find me on YouTube at Horror Amarada. I'm only there about one night a week. You can find me at Rumble at Horror Amarada Gaming, where I game every Sunday for exclusively some game. And then I'm here the rest of the time. Plus, on Wednesdays, I do a podcast with Sheepsidian, The Shagsworth, and No Green Rocks. We just, have a fun time and talk a lot.
I've been on your show before. It's fun.
Yeah. And that reminds me, I want to invite the two of you on there sometime. So, that's all I got.
Fair enough. All right, Dooby. Who the fuck is Dooby? Who's this frog? Who's this evil ass frog king?
I'm Dooby. I help run the politics server on Discord, like Scott said earlier. Discord.gg/politics or politics.gg in your browser. And we are the biggest, best politics /debate server on the Discord platform. Got like 70,000 people on the server now. We have AMAs with a ton of people. Roger Stone's a really big one, but we've had a ton of other people. Everybody from like authors, Buddhist monks, Martin Shkreli, politicians, people that are competing. We're gonna have the guy who won the I forget which primary it was. Republican won a primary in
Pennsylvania.
I can't remember. I need to look. So what happens is we have a really large, really active user base. We're all like politically involved, and a lot of times they just know these people, right? So one of our users happened to have his phone number, know the guy, and got us in touch, and we're going to have him on. We're scheduling that for next month at some point. So that's going to be really cool. Very active server, lots of voice channels, people arguing about everything all day. We allow just about anything on Discord TOS will allow us to allow. So,
but not rhinoceroses taking a shit. You will get banned if you post pictures of rhinoceroses
really
taking
funny.
a shit.
So there's a GIF. There's a GIF on like Discord's thing called the rhino shit GIF. Okay, that's what it's called on the server, and it's literally just a rhino taking a big shit. And to tell you like how like free speech we are, a lot of mods are saying, hey, this is really gross. I'm eating lunch. I don't want to see a rhino taking a giant shit, right? So the mod team wanted to ban it, and they were like muting people for it. And we had, as a mod team, and I have over 100 people on our mod team, we had like a 6-hour argument about the rhino shit gif and why it shouldn't be banned. We need to have it as part of the server. We made it the server banner for a while, right, to demonstrate like how much we care about the rhino shit gif and how important it is to the culture. Like we only ban things if we need to, right? So, including the rhino shit gif, you can post it on the server, it's totally fine.
How does somebody find your server if they're new to?
I DM'd you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but I gotta warn you though, it's a very angry place sometimes, very chaotic place.
You will find libertarians arguing with legit Islamo-fascists in VC.
Yeah. There's everything in that server, but that's why I love it. Like we do our best to make sure that we have a very diverse community, very diverse mod team, and we do our best to just encourage people to argue about everything all the time. So that's what we do there.
Zola Cola. Poll server is incredibly wholesome. What do you mean? You're a fucking liar. You're a fucking liar. All right. So I really appreciate you guys coming. This is a fun lead up towards Halloween. If you're still here, next Thursday, we will be doing Serial Killer Night, which is probably the closest thing to this type of content. Come by,
Carrie? I'm covering Peter Curtin.
I know a lot more about serial killers than I do about Satanic Panic. But
I mean, if you're
I'm
available,
be in Orlando at the content house Chrissy Mare's doing, but I don't know what's happening that night. Anyway, message me if I'm around.
Love Chrissy Mare.
Yeah, I'll message you if you want to come hang out before we do it. But we're gonna do Peter Curtin, and the whole thing is that I stay in the dark for all of these, chat. So if you're new here, like I don't know what's going on. Mark is the serial killer guy, and then he puts on a show and I get to react along with you guys and be like, what the fuck? My favorite reaction so far has been the Goaticorn. I think has honestly been the one. What is that one again? The two serial killers together.
You want to change my background real quick?
You can yeah, sure. But tell me who it is. I forgot who it is.
It is Leonard Lake and Charles Ng.
Yes.
Leonard Lake was living at the hippie colony. He had the Goaticorn. He didn't have it, but he would use the Goaticorn from his neighbor Otter, the Satanic Wizard.
Yeah.
The best thing about it is that Mark not only does his research, but he put together this entire presentation where I had no idea until the very end that one of the guys that they killed was a person that they killed just to get a car from them. And it was one of the few, it was like the only person that didn't get justice at his final trial.
Innocent of that murder.
And it just so happened to be that the person that was murdered for that car, his sister met this serial killer and this goat hybrid chimera Goaticorn at one point in her life and had personally met the serial killer man that had murdered her brother that she never got justice for. And it's those little twists at the end that fuck you up and make it hard to sleep at night.
Yep.
Can I ask, Mark, have you ever done Tamara Samsonova? It's like a Russian serial killer, an old lady who would think for over the course of 5 years, she murdered and ate over a dozen people.
I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar with a lot of the European serial killers. Okay. My knowledge is a lot more U.S. based.
Well, the reason that's
because it's hard to find shit, and I don't understand Cyrillic.
The reason that one's interesting, and I think you should look into it, is because the reason that a lot of people didn't really get into the reason she says she did this, right? And she was like a full-on witch, she looks like a witch. They call her Baba Yaga, right?
No.
But she would.
I'm just thinking
she would kill these
people
people
right now.
she would kill these people and then use their body parts in her like rituals, right, for like dark magic and shit. And,
like
and
you
she,
do as a witch, right?
like you do.
course,
And
yeah.
she claimed that the reason she did this was there's a demon in the attic of the house or the apartment that was forcing her to do this stuff. So if you're like wanting to get into like the Halloween spirit, that's a really good one to look into.
Do you know about what is her name? I think it's Janet Jackson, not related to Michael Jackson. She lived in Illinois or Ohio or like Indiana, one of those shitty Midwestern states, and like
Damn, Mark.
they are. Honestly, fuck Ohio. I hate Ohio. It's an awful state. It deserves to, not have a population. And by that, I mean they should all leave that state, not die.
That's right.
But, I hate that state. Lost. Oh, but, like,
Anna Jackson.
Thank you. Her house was haunted. They had a bunch of problems in the basement, and, like, her kids were in like scratches and playing with kids, and like cops went in there and are corroborating that like, look, we don't know if it's actually possessed, but it's
the Hell House, yeah.
Yes, they're just like, it's a wild house, and they're finding weird stuff in there, and then like a priest blesses it, and the house just went quiet.
Yeah, they actually ended up demolishing the house because everybody who went in there ended up like would believe that it was haunted. Right, so eventually
That's
it
the
was
one that
demolished
what's his
a couple
face
years ago,
from
like a year ago.
whatever state the night in and did that special on, wasn't it? The
Adam
Ghost
Conover?
Adventures guy.
Well, if you're really into haunted houses, Richmond and Petersburg, Virginia.
No, Richmond near your old apartment where they just had mannequins in the windows and they would turn the lights on at night in old historical buildings.
Yeah, they did do that. Like we would be downtown Richmond and you just walk by and there'd just be mannequins in Victorian outfits like. And you'd be like, what the fuck is this? And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's next. By the way,
the thing is, you would just point it, like I would be looking forward, walking down the street, and you're like, hey, look over to your left. And it's like things in the windows are like, it's mannequins. It's like, that's worse.
You know what's better than that? Is that building, that building is three buildings down from the Holocaust Museum.
Oh, that's amazing.
Please say they have some
Petersburg, Virginia is one of the most haunted places in the world because like of the Civil War and just the amount of like Civil War hospitals and like deaths that have occurred. It's rough.
The axe murders.
The axe what?
Dooby knows.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
New Orleans is haunted because of the axe murders.
Oh, I know.
There's like a lot of Italian like focused axe murders like in Louisiana for a while.
Man. New Orleans is depressing. Fuck that place.
Yeah, New Orleans is haunted because the axe murders and the voodoo. That's what it is.
And homeless. No,
you're just talking about people getting tranced out.
I'm okay. So I gotta admit, I'm like super biased. Because I grew up in, like, we're talking about cults and stuff. I grew up in a cult, basically. My family did voodoo. They did Santeria. They did all that shit, right? They did, like, Wiccan witch magic.
God, I wish we were better friends.
It's time for the panel to end, and now you fucking mentioned that you grew up in a cult? What the fuck is wrong with you, Dooby?
It's not a cult. It is a recognized
religion, okay?
That is a problem.
Yeah, and it just happens to be the first fucking case that Keanu Reeves takes.
He didn't grow up in Pio Mayombe. He didn't grow up in the poop blood pot people.
No. It just happens to be Keanu Reeves' first fucking court case in Devil's Advocate, but it's not a cult. Fuck out of here.
Like I said, it's not a cult. It's a problem.
Every time you reach over that way, Scott, it looks like you're reaching inside that tree. It's really kind of creepy.
You're reaching to that gateway to hell.
The
best thing is that I'm like 6 inches away from that hole that he's reaching into. I'm what he's reaching into.
Yo, I do gotta go. It was very nice to meet you, Carrie and Horror.
Nice to meet you.
Mark, nice to talk to you. I've very rarely done that, unfortunately. Scott, always great to talk to you.
Of course.
We'll see you around more.
Yeah, I'll debate you again. It's fine. All right, so
good night. It's good to meet you.
Good night. We're gonna get out of here and talk to the audience. I appreciate you guys coming so much. Please stay in touch.
Thanks for having me.
You
Thank
can
you
get
guys
me
for having
anytime.
me on. Yes. Good night. Oh God.
Good night.
Damn, Perry is quick to
I got it. Goodbye.
She figured it out. You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.